A sweet girl named Arya reflected that the villagers were lacking in work hands. She told her friends that they were absolutely needed by a man, all for the welfare of their native village. Another girl, Amelia, believed that only girls live in this village, and they did not cope with hard work. She knew that the locals hated men, but for the sake of the village, she agreed to endure. And Carrie wondered where to find those men. It is almost sure that no one will appear in such a muffin. Here, a girl named Lynn suggested finding these men, because the need for them was urgent. However, insecurity took over thoughts, reminding that they are in a mountainous area where it would not be easy to find someone. Finally, the girls heard some noise from the outside. Without thinking, Ira ran out of the cabin and looked to the sky. Looking into the sky, the girl noticed an incredible sight, as if the meteor fell nearby. At this time, all the girls have already ran out of the cabin, watching the mysterious object. Amelia thought it could be a falling star, while Ira believed it was someone flying. A huge, angry bear eyebrows in the forest, frightening everyone with a formidable growth. Knights who were clearly not ready to meet the bear came across him. Without seconds, he rushed at uninvited knights. The knights did not understand where this bear came from in the forest. They tried to pick up their fell comrades and help them escape, but the wounded feet did not obey. And when the bear was almost ready to erase the knights from the face of the earth, suddenly help came for Cain. The silhouette of a young man who was lightning with a bear appeared through clouds of dust. He was glad to end the monster quickly, as the bear could call others his river. The savior was a guy named Ryan Wallfield. The frightened knights began to reproach him for being late, accusing him of having perished. But the commander announced the retreat, putting everything on the Rhine's shoulders. However, the Rhine denied that the retreat was too late. As it turned out, the team has already got into the environment. The bear with his roar managed to call for a whole army of monsters. The knights hid behind the trees, not imagining what to do next. They did not even plan to fight, relying only on the rain. The rain assured them not to worry, because the number of monsters did not pose any threat to him. When the monsters were raised again, the rain actively used accelerated thinking. While he was waiting for something, the knights had already said goodbye to life. The rain remarked that today monsters are more than usual, and even suggested that they could be more than 100. Using the scout skills, the train was able to notice how many monsters were hiding nearby. And then the children used the ability to define the trajectory to instantly destroy all monsters. Then they activated magical energy and stopped accelerated thinking when the monsters' claws almost touched their faces. Finally, the rains won, and the bears' heads began to fall on the ground. Under the pressure of a sharp windblade, the monster died one by one, without any chances for salvation. In the end, only torn pieces of monsters remained on the ground. The knights were stunned by the Rhine rapidly overcome such a large number of monsters. They even seemed to be a demon in the human likeness. However, in general, this did not bother them, because the monsters were already defeated and had to turn into a stone. When another monster turned into a stone, it happened in the hands of one of the knights, which was infinitely glad. After all, with such prey could live carelessly until the end of the days. However, he was quickly warned that the stone could not be taken with him. These nights they continued to collect stones left by monsters. They rejoiced, because of the rain, hunting turned into a regular walk. Meanwhile, the Rhine has lived in the family of antidemonian magicians for 15 years. After the rebirth, the Rhine was amazed, because he, an ordinary office worker, suddenly woke up in the child's body. The last thing he remembered was how he was sitting alone with a glass at home. The Rhine did not know whether alcohol was to blame or something else, because it was only 33. But now it didn't matter, because it became an antidemonian magician. Anti-demo, aristocrats settle near the habitats of monsters, such as demonic forest or monstery valleys. Their task is to take the demons for the country's security. However, they are only by aristocrats. The Rhine was never seen as a noble. When the Rhine entered the hall, where he was already waiting, he was immediately praised for his excellent work. Waiting for him at the table, with his feet on a wooden surface, the manager of the border army of the Holy Kingdom sat. He acknowledged that this time the Rhine had struck everyone by destroying many monsters. The coins in the bag on the table were rewarded. But the Rhine noticed that the coins were not enough, and it was angry. Instead, the manager did not see anything unusual in this. He recalled the Rhine that his situation depends entirely on the mercy of their king. The manager noted that the Rhine was no longer lacking in wealth, so it is not for him to complain. The Rhine did not argue, just added what would be in the city if someone needs. The Rhine went to the city, dreaming of getting something more. By the way, It has been a lot of time from the last visit of this guy to the city, more than a month. Occasionally, he came across a friend's hut. The Rhine began to think about whether he was fine. Not long thinking, the guy decided to visit his friend known as a zoologist. The Rhine has not seen him for a long time. The Grain was glad to see the Rhine and immediately began to question, as in the case, because he had not returned home for a long time. The Rhine replied with sadness that he was alone again with all the hassle. Hearing this, he took a deep breath, feeling anxious for a friend, whether it is only necessary to ask the Rhine to say if he needed help. After all, with such intensity, he would drive himself into the grave. It was the Rhine that always undertook the destruction of monsters on each of the missions. Books on the magic of the Rhine showed the edges of the extraordinary. Rhine's eyes shone. The guy looked impressed with these rare and amazing books. Gur was especially kept for the Rhine, because he knew that the Rhine was fond of new knowledge of magic. Then what to do? The Rhine always sought perfection, because so many ancient magic remained unexplored. The Rhine took the books, and began to read them directly in the eyes of the Zaire. He noted that the language of magic was very similar to the programming language from his world, so he could understand it without difficulty. The Rhine was enthusiastically immersed in the worlds of books about star and creative magic. At that time, seals were of particular interest in the Rhine's research focused on curses. Ger has just heard about demonic aristocrats who do not live up to 40 years. Then alarm. Hearing such a statement, the Rhine fell silent, but the Grain asked him to say something. In the end, the Rhine smiled and reassured Zira so that he would not worry. However, Ger denied that he could not otherwise, because 50 had already turned 50. The Regan hesitated for a moment. After all, Sight noted that no anti-Mont magician has lived for more than 40 years because of the curse, and that's really so. The ruler reassured Zira, assuring that the study of the curse was moving forward. However, if it was possible to find the inheritance of the magicians, it would greatly add confidence. The Rhine also noticed that the Grain was a little upset today. Ger confessed that he would soon have to leave the country. He shared from the Rhine, who decided to go to his grandchildren, so he was going to close the store and get rid of his books. However, the Rhine was glad to buy all the books from Zira. Despite the fact that it would take more than one day to transport all these books, the Rhine still believed that ancient magic was an extremely useful thing. Having reached out to one of the books, the Rhine applied the spell of the storage room, and the book disappeared instantly. Thus, Aval is a spell of star magic that allows the Rhine to move any object to which it touches into another space. And if he forgets it, he will be able to use another subject. This magic gave the Rhine the opportunity to see all the items he placed in the repository and make sure that everything is in place. For him, this ability was indispensable, because without it, the guy did not even imagine how he would cope with the organization of his things. This magic was used by ancestors from ancient civilization, and the Rhine believed that it was not necessary to abuse it in the open space. So, after all, he decided to quickly complete the transfer of books. Already walking away from the city, the boy reflected. Although he mastered many ancients, the curse remains an unresolved secret for him. Under such conditions, when the Rhine reaches 40, it will die. But he did not want such a fate at all, so he was looking for options for how to avoid it. By the way, the Rhine remembered that it was supposed to collect vegetables from the garden today. However, when he was in front of the house, he saw a terrible picture that greatly impressed him. In the very center of the Rhine vegetable garden stood a carriage with horses, which shamelessly caught vegetables from the greenhouse. Outraged, the Rhine ran to the horses, ordering them to stop this outrage, because they did not have any idea how much effort requires growing plants. However, the horses did not bother. At this point, someone roaring the sword in the ground just in front of the Rhine's nose. "Who are you the hell you take?" he exclaimed. But a mysterious stranger, based on his sword, said that right now Count Rarnan had thrown them. The rain has slowly said that it was his home, so the damage caused to the horses that consume his crop should be answered. And the knight explained that she only accompanies the Graf. Finally, the Graf himself appeared unexpectedly and left the rain calmly. However, the Earl, smiling, called Rena his son and offered to postpone conversations for later. After all, His Majesty called the Rhine, so he would have to hurry and prepare. The Rhine was stunned, hearing that he was called his son. This meant that the Count was his father, even if they were seeing the first time. But the Rhine still could not understand the reasons for their meeting. The Earl noticed his great surprise and suggested to discuss it later through the bride of the Rhine, about which Rhine, "This is the princess of this country, Lady Amels," Hearing this, the Rhine was amazed twice, but still went with his father to the capital. 2 months later, the Rhine was ready to conquer the heart of the princess. The Earl advised him to focus and be more serious, but the guy clearly nervous. The Earl explained that because of the short life of the anticipation sorcerers, they agreed that instead of hunting, the Rhine's demons would marry the princess of this country. However, the Rhine already knew about it from his mother. However, they added that if the Rhine does not cope, the groom will be elected among the sons of other families, similar to him by age. The Rhine was surprised to hear it. The Graf, looking at his expression, realized that he did not know anything about it. He stated with excitement that if the Rhine married a princess, they would become part of the royal family. Earl Ari stressed that it is extremely important, and all responsibility for this decision lies on the Duso Rhine. Finally, the Earl turned to the quiet Rhina to the question of whether she listened to him. She said with a smile that's yes. The Graf was in anticipation, which would soon become more than just a Graf. He asked the Rhine to thank her mother for giving her life. At the end, the Count said he believed in the rain. But these words even more sold the boy's soul. He was aware that his father had no faith at all, and did everything only for his own benefit. When the Rhine's mother faded away from the curse, his father did not try to behave as a real father. And the reason he suddenly remembered this duty was obvious. Earl fervently sought the power of the royal family, so he persistently persuaded the Rhine to marry the princess. The Rhine realized that his life was perfect until his father pulled him into his ambitions. The Rhine considered the princess unattractive, but as soon as he saw her, his eyes shone. The princess, noticing the Rhine, first met with his gaze. She seemed surprisingly sweet and true beauty. However, when the time of the ceremony has almost come, the princess, with a sense of guilt, suddenly apologized to Ra for some reason. He took her hand, but did not understand why she apologized. Finally, an announcement of the start of the ceremony, and His Majesty began his speech. Finally, the door to the hall dissolved. Kid entered the hall, kneeling before His Majesty, first apologized, and then asked to review his decision. The king, sitting on the throne and stroking his long beard, asked who this man was. The cheeky young man replied that his name is Chekluses, and he is the eldest son of the Duke of Great Height. The whole situation seemed too suspicious to the king. The most amazing was that no one was talking about. Even if this guy is a duke's son, it is unacceptable to prevent the royal family engagement. Although the Rhine did not want to interfere, he realized that it was the wrong decision. At some point, the Rhine noticed that the face of all guests looked very strange for some reason. At this point, cyclists turned to His Majesty, stating that the princess had the right to choose a man at the call of the heart. This finally annoyed the princess. Rani released his hand and retreated from him, and here the Rhine realized everything. It has been planned for a long time, and all present, except the Rhine and Count of course, knew what should happen here. At that moment, the king had already got acquainted with the conditions of check rent and understood their meaning. Then he decided to turn to Earl of Rarnana to find out his opinion. However, the Earl clearly shuddered when His Majesty turned to him. With trembling hands, Earl said that the engagement between the witches is a long-standing tradition, inherited from the first kings, a sacred custom that cannot be broken. After listening to the Count, the king decided to turn to his advisor to find out his opinion on the case. He dropped on one knee before the king and said that the noble ones, who once fought with the demons, had long been killed. 5 years ago, the Rhine took this role. The Rhine said that the engagement is now the best solution, as even more serious problems may arise in the future. According to Rains, the king learned that the guy is now 15 years old. He then asked if he really was fighting the demons since the age of 10. The Rhine replied that the interlocutor was completely right. It was quite familiar to him. However, the attendees began to whisper. In their opinion, the guy carried a solid nonsense. Even elite soldiers did not always return alive from the demonic forest. Guests simply could not imagine how a young man like the Rhine was able to defeat demons. The king noted that the guests did not believe the words of the Rhine, and asked the young man to tell how he managed to cope with the demons. The Rhine was unclear why others were interested in this story. Despite everything, he decided to share part of the information. Showing simultaneously, the Rhine noted that he uses a spell called Wind Blade. These words caused only a skeptical smile. He started laughing, pointing his finger in the rain. Even the king did not restrain laughter hearing these words. After all, the spell of the wind is considered too weak to destroy the demons, and moreover, they are possessed by absolutely everyone. However, Raung did not understand the ridicule of guests. He was convinced that if you improve this spell, it would become several times more powerful and would require much less man. At that moment, the king solemnly announced that his decision was made. At this moment, he abolished the treaty, which, surprisingly, was quite surprised by the Rhine. However, he argued that he had long dreamed of getting rid of this tradition initiated by the first king. The king believed that to fight demons, using only simple magic of wind blades, it was far from ridiculous, even in the context of a joke. This time, the earl realized how serious the situation was, and wanted to say something, but did not find words from tension. At this point, the knights approached him and politely asked the count to retreat. So everything ended. It was not easy. Anti-demonic nobles were cancelled, and the Graf was removed from the feast with escort. The earl accused the Rhine of all the troubles, expelled from the family. In short, he left the Rhine to his or her own. After the fierce demand of his father, he never got to his eyes again. The Rhine became a regular citizen. Now, no matter what the Rhine says, no one pays attention to it. From this lesson, Brain understood one thing. It is difficult to live in this world. Lying carelessly on the grass, he suddenly realized that he had remained unemployed. The guy did not understand how to live now, because it would be impossible to keep himself at the expense of a small vegetable. Then the Rhine wondered about the adventurist's career, relying on his experience in the destruction of demons. But he realized that after all that happened, no one would accept him there. Suddenly, the guy sounded like lightning. He was insight, and here the Rhine dared to try something new. He rose to his feet, determined to leave the country. Earlier, this thought had already come to his mind, but he could not dare, since anti-demonic aristocrats have no right to leave the country's boundaries. From now on, the Rhine had full freedom to do everything he only wants. The Rhine began to think about the plan and realized that it would be extremely difficult to walk. So he decided to try to climb the air. For example, use compressed air under your feet and create your own rocket likeness. Soon the Rhine gathered supplies, which will be enough for a few days. In addition, the Rhine protected its body with magic strengthening and reduced air resistance due to the magic of wind protection. The Rhine was now fully ready and sure that everything would be fine. Without any thought, the guy decided to start the plan immediately. In a moment, the Rhine was already rushing up, like a bullet, conquering the tops of the sky and even for a few seconds in space. For the guy, it was undoubted success. He found a great way to move. With such a jump height, he could get anywhere. The only question remained, where exactly? However, when the Rhine began to fall, I realized that he did not know how to stop. The Rhine flew and made itself for not predicting the possibility of such a fall. However, it was not the main one now. It was necessary to choose the best place to land. Flying over the settlements, he realized that he could not land here. After all, his rapid fall turned into an unrestrained flight. The Rhine realized that in this position, the main characters collect all the will and fists. However, he was not ready to die. Finally, the rain broke to the ground somewhere in the forest. It was the same object that Arya and her girlfriends were noticed during the first flight. The girls decided to go to the forest to investigate what it was. Arya wanted to go alone, but the girlfriends insisted accompany her, because it was too risky. Finally, one of the girls, sitting on a tree, found what they were looking for so long. This find caused admiration for June, and she hurried to find out where to go. She was answered that it was necessary to go to the demonic forest where the Rhine is. When the girls walked through the forest and saw great destruction, they were worried about danger. After all, if someone caused significant damage to the forest, it could have caused rage with local monsters. Maria agreed with the girls and suggested returning to the village to reflect on the defense plan. Suddenly, Sui shouted loudly and pointed her finger in a certain direction. Arius hurried to Sui, asking what had happened. The girl replied that someone was lying nearby. At this point, the Rhine woke up and realized that he had remained alive. He felt the joy that he used the strengthening of the body in time, because without it he could not survive. The head of the young hero was rotating and he could not get up. Did he run out of all of his Manu? At that moment, Arya approached him and asked if everything was fine with him. Other girls also approached the Rhine and began to consider it. In the end, Kiri wondered if he was alive at all. The Line decided to contact the Rhine directly and asked if he was still in this world. The girl explained that if someone falls asleep in the demonic forest, it would inevitably die. Only the phrase, demonic forest, came as the Rhine woke up instantly. On all sides, excitedly asked where he is. The response came, "You are in the kingdom of Astro." So the next question is inevitable. Who are you? Curie explained the boy who came from the nearest village. At the same time, for the Rhine, the name of the kingdom of Astra was new and unfamiliar. At the moment, while the Rhine thought thoughtfully in thoughts, Linet tried to find out where he arrived. The Rhine felt a threat and warned the girls to immediately run away. He knew that the monsters were about to appear. It was too late to run. A demonic wolf appeared on the slope. Arya froze with surprise, seeing the monster. She could not understand how he appeared so instantly. Melia screamed, insisting on a rapid waste, because soon here will be a wattage of demonic wolves. The Rhine decided to apply a reconnaissance spell. He realized that they with the girls got into the environment, and there are too many monsters around. Having realized that with his current level of mana, he will be able to release wind blades only once, and other spells of forces will not be enough. At that point, Arya asked what the Rhine was doing and stressed that they should run immediately. Arya stated that the Rhine could not cope with the monsters on its own. But the Rhine, not intending to ceremony, just advised everyone to lie down to the ground if they did not want to die. The girls, of course, began to lose their lives. Finally, the Rhine began to prove the spell, the stroke of a lightning wind blade, and in an instant, all the wolves were defeated nearby. The girls had to pull it further, holding their feet. Harry was delighted with the Rhine, though she pulled him to the village. After all, the young man over alone has overcome so much demonic wolves. And here is the Arya that pulled him for another leg, had other thoughts. However, Kiri had no idea that her desire could come true. After all, she just saw a falling star and gave her husband. And so the girls are already pulling the young man to their village. Arya is on the right side. He argued that his presence was important for the welfare of the village, but she only perceived it as a worker. Other girls believed that Arya was doing well, because she had a lot of practice. Kiri advised her not only muscles, but also with a workout of the mind, for which Arya was indignant with her to silence. Melia noted that it would be great to have such a strong guy in their village in all circumstances. There is one more question. Will Rin agree? While the girls pulled the boy further, Pirian and Melia whispers discussed something of their own. Arian noticed this and looked at them with a negligent look. Kiri only reminded Arya of the importance of the first impression. Arya stirred up and replied that she knew it. Finally, the rain woke up. The boy first asked where he was. Feeling his head hurts, he touched a place with a compress that was pressed against the skin. At this point, the room included Melia, Ki, and Aya with a dish in her hands. The girls happily stated that they could finally reach the top of success. They were also pleased that the guy was feeling well because they were very worried about him. Others just apologized for inconvenience. But Arya could not restrain her joy and dissatisfaction, given that bringing a boy to the village was extremely difficult. Piri and Melia quickly brought Arya to her senses, slightly pushing her for the elbow. While the Rhine was sitting on the bed, the girls' whispers discussed the situation, trying to understand everything. In the end, Melia asked the Arya to speak quieter. This time, Sui and Lena came to the room, who also rejoiced that the guy finally woke up. Initially, the guy thanked the salvation and wondered if he was a magician. The Rhine replied a little embarrassed that somewhere. And Sui said with delight that she first sees such powerful magic. At the end, the girls allowed the Rhine to stay with them how much he pleased. He thanked their kindness and admitted that he should not settle any more. Hearing this, the girls were happy more and invited the Rhine to stay in their village, because there were no men at all. Of course, the Rhine was interested in why there were no men in this village. The girls hurried to change the topic of conversation, so Arya handed the Rhine a plate with food, claiming that he had to eat first to restore strength. Immediately afterwards, all the girls ran out of the room, loudly closing the door. Len and Sui were disappointed with the behavior of the elders, because they still wanted to talk to Rem. Instead, Syria and Mill were delighted with Reinhardt's words that he has nowhere to go. The girls considered him a real professional and the perfect find, so they decided that such an opportunity could not slip out of their hands. Finally, they got labor resources. Amelia also decided that the boys should stay in the village, despite any of its expenses. She already imagined that in addition to defense against demons, Rin would work in the fields. On the other hand, she suggested that the guy would also be able to repair the homes. Kiri rejoiced that they were able to find. The girls unanimously stated that they would not allow the Rhine to escape, while he tasted calmly the dishes that he brought him to the room. The next morning, the girls started cooking breakfast, carefully carrying the food so that they did not miss anything. By this time, the Rhine has already stood out of bed. After a good rest, he significantly improved his well-being and could move freely. From what he saw on the drawing, Ram realized that the girls had already cleaned his clothes. He felt pleasure and decided to thank his lifeguards. The long corridor came to life with the brightness of his new clothes. The Rhine realized that it was the first time he came out from the moment he was delivered here. I wonder where the girls are now. The Rhine remembered how much had happened with him during this time. He couldn't believe it. Finally, when the guy found the girls, he saw them having breakfast. Arya was the first to ask if he was feeling better. Milio congratulated him on a good morning, and Kiri made the remarks of Lin so that she would not be sorted. Milio invited the Rhine to join the table and feel at home. The Rhine did not refuse and sat next to Kira. The Lion decided to give gratitude to the Rhine for salvation, and did it with her mouth filled. Ki was surprised to push her on her head, advising her first. Linus quickly swallowed food and asked off abusively why Kiri was doing so with her. Kiri answered with equivalent indignation. It is simply impossible to do so. We also added that the Lion will no longer receive rice, which caused a great indignation from it. The Rhine watched the girls' argument and smiled cute, realizing that this place had been tearing on life. Melia noted that everything is due to his presence. It was noted that then no one could think that people could appear from heaven. So they decided to find out what was the matter. However, their study was prevented by wolves. But Rollins saved everyone. Rollins felt that he had to thank the girls, because they brought him to the village and cured him. At this point, Sui stared at her plate. Amelia noticed it and asked if she wanted a supplement. Without waiting for the answer, Amelia decided to bring a little more. At that moment, Arya hanged over the table, putting her hands on him, and stated firmly, referring to the Rhine, that they would have to talk after dinner. The girl assured that she would show the boy to the village as soon as he finished having breakfast. Arya added that she and Rhine have several things they can do while examining the terrain. Nilaya and Kyria are smiling widely at this time, trying to be friendly. The Rhine noticed the strange behavior of the girls and asked what happened, to which those in one voice answered, nothing. Meanwhile, when the Rhine and Eri were walking through the village, the Rhine thought that this place was not so bad. Eri noted that due to the proximity of the village to the demonic forest, most residents left for other settlements, even to the city. All men left with them. Arya explained that that is why they are so glad to see this guy here. Finally, Arya led Regina to a place that was aimed at showing. The wasteland seemed unknown, but the girl solemnly announced that this land was now restored. To pay, he will have to give the girls part of the crop, so you need to work well. But the Rhine, looking at the usual wasteland, could not understand anything. She realized with relief that she managed to clearly explain the Rhine, so she decided to go. But she did not have time to take a step, as the Rhine delicately detained her shoulder, asking to stay for a minute. Narya was outraged that the Rhine grabbed it so suddenly, scaring it, and the Rhine asked what he had to do. However, Arya clearly did not want to answer this question, lightly disappearing from the field of view of the Rhine, under the pretext that she still had many things. The Rhine was in numbness, not having the slightest idea what to do next. He decided to review the list and felt joy, because he prepared everything necessary in advance. Then he wondered what he needed at that moment. I decided that first, the area should be aligned, and then the wood was obtained. When all the tools were ready, the Rhine decided to start work. At this point, Kiri and Arya sat in their home, plunging into a conversation. Kiri was outraged that Arya left the Rhine herself. The girl could not understand what then was in the Aryas. Arya, on the contrary, believed that the Rhine should work out food and night. But Kiri was convinced that the Rhine would not be able to cope with this task on his own, and it could take too long. However, the girl intended to use this place for the fields. Kiri decided to postpone this issue for later, and reminded everyone that he should be friendly with the Rhine to agree to stay in the village. Grabbing a Riza for his cheeks, he noted that he should not rush to him, strenuously sending it. It is better to show the most kindness. He tried again to explain that such an occasion would no longer be rain, and in no way can be neglected. Arya could not stand, and with tears in her eyes, raising her voice, asked what to do. After all, Kiri knows that she is afraid of men. However, Kiri asked her not to cry. She thought she didn't do anything wrong. After all, she just showed the boy to the village and told where he could settle. Mary decided to apologize to Arya for her perseverance, and acknowledged that she had exaggerated a little. This time Milia appeared. Seeing that the Rhine remained alone, it was extremely indignant in this circumstance. The girl believed that to appoint a Rhine for such a task, it is unacceptable, because he could just escape. And here she was settled by the idea. Milia was right. so she decided to try the Rhine. This time, the Rhine has already coped with the main part of the work, just left a little to clean the ends. Then he intended to cultivate the tree, and suddenly Arya appeared, indignant and strongly asked, "What is it?" Considering the tree and not believing in her own words, she asked if it was from the demonic forest. The Rhine replied that he decided to align the ground, so he removed the extra trees. The guy said that those trees could hardly need girls. However, Ara was more interested in what the Rhine really thought when he cut down so many greens. The Rhine did not understand Arai because she asked her to make this land suitable for life. Meanwhile, the Array was angry. She assured that the Rhine clearly overdone. He looked around in confusion. If the demonic forest had suffered such significant damage, the monsters would certainly attack the village. Arya no longer doubted that they were waiting for an attack of a whole horde of monsters, so the girl decided to return and inform everyone of the danger. But the Rhine urged Ari not to worry so much. The outraged Ari denied that he would not work, so the Rhine should stop saying nonsense. Finally exhaling, Ari ordered the Rhine to stay here and prepare everything for defense, and she decided to go for the rest. As soon as Ari disappeared from the field of view, the Rhine had a question. What to do now? The guy thought and realized that the main problem was what was unknown where the monsters could attack, so he decided that it was worth considering the possibility of erecting walls around the village. However, the Rhine quickly realized that in this case, it would not be possible to protect against the attack of monsters. And suddenly, like a lightning, he was illuminated by a brilliant thought. When the Aya ran with the news that the Rhine had destroyed trees in the demonic forest, all were amazed. On the other hand, she had to apologize for everyone, because the responsibility lay on her. But suddenly Lin hit his fist on the table, stating that it was the fault of the area. The girl also did not realize what to do all of them now. She noticed how upset Lin was, and decided to approach to support her. This time, Milia to think. The Rhine, no doubt, is very strong, but suddenly it will fail, and then the village will be doomed. The girls did not know how to act in such a situation, until Arius noted that they had no other choice. She suggested that together to go to rule and defend the village from the monsters. The girls went to a place where, according to the agreement, they had to wait for the Rhine. She felt that the monsters were already here. Mill was worried about their number. At this point, the monster was still in the room when Lin suddenly exclaimed, pointing her finger. She pointed to a huge hole that suddenly appeared in front of the girls. Amazed, the girls could not believe their eyes. There was never such a failure before. The girls suggested that this failure arose through a demon escaped from the forest. At that moment, a spooky roar of the monster was heard. The girls suddenly noticed that the Rhine had already come into battle, and without spending time, rushed to him. They soon noticed how he was standing on the edge of the break. It was strange to see him. Hearing the voices of the girls, he returned to them and warned to be careful, because it was dangerous here. The rain rose and subsided. Meanwhile, a crowd of monsters has already been gathered on the other side of the lawn. Kiri engulfed panic when he saw a whole army of monsters. Lin, standing nearby, reassured him, although she was very scared. The Rhine asked the girls to wait a little, assuring that he almost finished. There was a bow in his hands, but there were no arrows. The girls were surprised to watch what was happening. Instead, Rhine, stretching the bowstring, knew that wind arrows were losing their strength at a long distance. The closer the enemy is, the more powerful the arrow is. Therefore, the strength of the shot can be different, from devastating to weak damage. It was then that the Rhine decided to apply its spell, called the Wind Blade for the arrow. Maria watched the events completely lost in the unfolding of the situation. An incredibly powerful wind began to form around the rain. Finally, the arrow stretched on the onions appeared, and the rain clearly moved to the monsters. Reflecting for a long time, the Rhine released an arrow that flew directly towards the monsters with a terrible speed and force. Meanwhile, the foam demons did not yet know about the approaching danger. They raced fearlessly forward to meet the Rhine, but when the arrow hit the first wolf, the Rhine exclaimed, "Wind arrow, wind blade," and immediately something incredible on the other side. One arrow flew from one wolf to another, striking each of them. The girls were delighted and stunned by such a surprise, but suddenly the magic stone hit the head of Lin. The girls recognized these stones and realized that so many years could live with so many. When everyone realized that these were the stones that fell out of the demons and that the Rhine on its own was able to destroy them as many, he looked at his bow and realized that he was too fascinated, because he could do without a bow. At this point, the Arya ran to the Rhine, which stood right above the pit, and said they saw a similar pit here. The girl suggested that the monster was still nearby. However, the Rhine explained that it was he who created the pits with the help of land management. He stressed that wood is still needed, and it would not be so easy to repel the monster attacks. This explained why this man created a protective shaft around the village. He assured that in this way they would not have to worry where the monster could attack. But what happens if they just jump over the shaft? To this, the Rhine replied that that is why in one place he had arranged a ditch in advance, through which the monsters could jump. Now there is only one place to protect the village. Amelia, holding a whole bunch of magical stones, glowed with joy that the problem was solved. She was convinced that the moat would help them significantly, and gratefully turned to the Rhine for his regular rescue intervention. At this point, the interested Line looked carefully at the mole and its danger, while Susie, standing nearby, warned her to be careful. After that, Amelia noticed the firewood with an even greater enthusiasm, which cut down the Rhine. He explained that he had harvested them in sufficient quantities, because the houses in the village needed repair. Amelia also did not think that the Rhine was overwhelmed with the wood, because it was exactly what they needed. At the same moment, someone tried to sneak into the Rhine from behind. Mary Lynn suddenly attacked the Rhine with hugs. The Rhine was stunned by such a surprise and asked why it suddenly became so. On the other hand, the girl looked at the Rhine's face carefully, noting his incredible strength. The Rhine laughed and promised to try even more. She rejoiced. Lynn, standing on the back of the Rhine, decided that they would work together from now on. Meanwhile, Lynn hugged the Rhine, and the thoughtful Arya stood nearby. She tried to comprehend everything she did. He realized that he was able to create something similar, only by managing the elements of the earth. But a new question was, how much force did you need to create it? Everyone, without a doubt, believed that the Rhine was a real rescuer of their village. At the same time, the hero himself pleased Lynn to climb him, but she persistently refused. Meanwhile, Sui also sought to ride it. When the line finally got off the boy, a thoughtful place opened before his gaze. He approached her and asked what happened. However, he noted with distrusting that he had a mess here. But Lynn disagreed. She defended the boy, noting that he eventually saved them. However, the Rhine himself thought it was his fault. But the dissatisfied community, as Sheldon said, was advice that he realized himself. The girl announced that this time she would forgively apologize, but warned, if he repeats such guilt, there would be no mercy. The Rhine did not seek conflict, so he only assured that he would now be more careful. While others were cabbage from the local to cause a smile, she decided to stop the conversation and invite the Rhine to herself. At that moment, he realized that he would have to stay in this village for a while. Standing on the edge of the break, Arya asked the Rhine what to do with the magic stones that remained after the monsters. After all, if left unattended, other people just take advantage of them. He felt the greatest joy when it was necessary to collect stones. The line asked the most important thing. How did they move to the other side when there is no bridge? This was not a problem for him. Due to his ability to manage the earth, he forced the soil to cuddle and create something like a bridge. The girls were stunned when the guy created a bridge in an instant. Lynn was even more passionate than others. She realized that magic is a real miracle. The girl ran after the Rhine and persistently asked her to teach her magic. However, the Rhine replied that she was still too early to engage in this art. I realized that not everyone can master magic. Therefore, there is a harsh selection before starting. The Rhine suggested that this country was no exception to this rule. Lynn insisted, moving the Rhine to teach her magic, but he invariably remained adamant in his refusal. This did not stop the hardened Lynn. Even during the dinner, when everyone gathered at the table, she again asked the Rhine to teach her magic, promising to fulfill any wishes. The Rhine explained that she would not teach her magic, no matter how carefully she asked, because she is unlikely to succeed. However, Lynn promised to make every effort. Meanwhile, Arya and Kira poured soup on plates. Lena, on the contrary, did not even eat the Rhine. She settled in his arms and sat down comfortably. Although the Rhine tried to ask her to climb, the line remained in its place and begged him to teach her magic. She was surprised how Lynn could not hesitate to her knees with a guy. But she was a girl, and she didn't need to be ashamed. After all, that guy was her brother. In the end, Kiri could not stand and decided to intervene. Carefully take the girl by the face and politely ask to allow the Rhine to eat quietly. Finally, Lynn was behind the Rhine. Key, however, apologized to the young man and added that he could now eat quietly. As for Lena, Kira sent her to the room. The line shouted at the whole house, "It's not honest!" For a certain time, all the plates are emptied. helping Kiri. She considered it necessary to apologize and thank. Although it could not really afford it, it was not a problem for the Rhine. He was even more concerned with the fact that the line was eating it all. However, Kiri believed that she should think about her behavior. In this case, the Rhine maintained cold-bloodedness. Ario told Alicia everything, and it caused her rage. She ordered Cassis to find all the scoundrels who decided to escape from the village, and stated that she would personally deal with each of them so that they would ask for death. The Rhine smiled fun, saying that it was a trifle. But Kiri believed that she should better follow the line. Suddenly, the Rhine caught himself thinking that Lin's conversation did not look like a child. Her manner was more inherent in her husband. So, Kiri decided to tell the history of the Rhine, starting with the words that Lin once had an older brother. They were inseparable, and Lin loved him. At that time, the Rhine asked what happened, and Kira replied that the girl's brother had died during the attack of demons. At that moment, the Rhine realized that he had in vain touched the topic, and felt embarrassment. He was in a hurry to apologize for it, but Kiri assured him that everything was fine and asked not to worry. However, Kiri noticed that the line was still worried about this situation. She realized that if she had magical forces, she would probably be able to save her brother. In the end, Kiri reassured the Rhine, saying that there was no reason to excite, and promised to discuss everything with Lin. It was then that the Rhine realized that Lin dreams of mastering magic to protect those who are expensive and protect her home. In this case, the Rhine made the final decision. While everyone else was sleeping sweetly, he carefully prepared everything he needed, thinking that he may be able to do so. The next morning, the Rhine gathered everyone in the same room. From today, he decided to teach magic girls. Of course, Lin was delighted. Instead, Arya was clearly dissatisfied with the Rhine left. He asked her why she had such a cheerful look. She answered indignantly that he thought again something strange. The Rhine tried to assure her that he had no such thoughts. The Rhine confessed that he simply does not know how to teach magic in their country. Instead, Mill explained that senior sources are just learning students, and so they have everything. Amelia noted that when the sorcerers are taken from the students of girls who do not have a natural train for magic, they usually have other intentions. However, sometimes their goal is to adopt such girls. Those who have mastered magic fall into the hands of rich merchants or aristocrats and become prostitutes. The Rhine shocked such stories, causing it a complete misunderstanding of what is happening in this country. So the guy sought to start as soon as possible. He gave the girls some items and asked them to use them immediately. The girls asked what cards were. The Rhine explained that they are magical determinants. Lin was surprised to use these magical determinants. Curie was more concerned about the high cost of these artifacts. However, the Rhine believed that their price was not bitten. Suddenly, Melia noted that when she applied to the determinant magic, he had words. Instead, the Rhine was surprised when Amelia used magic. He could not think that a girl could be able to. After all, this is what he was going to teach them today. Melia explained that she had already been doing magic before. The Rhine explains that the definition indicates the element to which people have a tendency. The Rhine explained that each person has a tendency to a certain element. With the help of a magical determinant, you can find out what elements are suitable for this person. Watching Amelia, Lin realized that she has a good magic of light, and decided to find out what elements she was suitable. However, when the girl just waved the card, nothing happened. The Rhine laughed and explained that this does not work. You must first learn to feel magical energy. Lin instead was annoyed that she couldn't do it right now. Then she wondered what the determinant has to do with magic, and the Rhine liked this question. He explained that magic is activated using manu from the body to impose a spell. Therefore, it is extremely important to first learn how to feel magical energy. However, even when he heard it, the Rhine still did not understand anything. Instead, the Rhine reported that he had prepared a special simulator to improve the sensation of mana. He argued that when studying magic, this is the most important step. It turns out that the determinants are able to absorb magical energy, which would greatly accelerate the training of girls. Lena was already burning with impatience. The Rhine approached her, gently ran ahead on his head, and explained that he should not rush. Over time, she will master everything, so let her not worry. Meanwhile, while the Rhine told everything in detail, one of the girls noted that the guy became very similar to the teacher, which was quite embarrassed. At this point, Kira cried, feeling helpless because of his inability to act. The girl even then believed that the determinant just broke. Maria also had a determinant, but for some reason she was covered by fear. After a few hours of work, Sui and Line finally launched the device again. The element of the line was water, while Sui owned the earth. Kiri, still responsible for her identification card, felt great nervousness. At that moment, the Rhine decided to simply continue the class. Now he sought to introduce the girls to their original spells, so he asked to be kept. The rain began to show the magic of the creation of water under the leadership of Sui and Lena, leaving girls in a pleasant surprise. This was not enough, and the girls asked Rain to repeat the demonstration. But Rain himself did not even expect that it would impress them. So he decided to turn to Sui, so that she would perform this spell again and extend her glass. After interrupting classes, she suggested that the lesson be reinforced. Hearing this, the Rhine wondered if she was well known on magic. The girl replied that she versed in her, but prefers to start with the training of physical strength. She believed that basic knowledge is true, but it was worth focusing on the practice of magic of the elements. After all, without the proper level of possession of magic, the use of this spell would be impossible. However, some claimed that everyone could master it. Although the Rhine did not agree with it, she said that the use of magic without the ability in this element is rare. Then, leaning her head, Arya asked whether this means that even having a magical power, it was impossible to apply strengthening. The Rhine replied that it was possible, but development without possession of elements is impossible. So it is advisable to focus on its magical element. They heard it. The area began to empty. The Rhine wondered what happened, to which she only replied that she wanted to go out into the fresh air. Looking at the place where she left, he assumed that she did not like his way of teaching magic. So the guy decided to apologize and said Sui and Line to wait for him a little. Then Kiri whispered quietly that he did nothing wrong. Just this area is really grateful to him, but he made the decision to teach magic. She asked the Rhine to provide her with everything he needed and advised her to study hard with Lin and Sui. Despite all the efforts of the Rhine, Lin could not succeed yet. As if she did not try hard, the water remained stationary. The Rhine quietly asked her not to rush, and he looked closely at Sui. She did not do anything yet. On the other hand, she sought to do her best if Lin was successful. But the Rhine calmly explained that there was no need to follow its example. At this point, Kiri and Arya returned to the room. Arya approached Raya with a polite request to teach her the art of magic. The cunning Line stated that Arya would no longer catch up with them. However, the outraged Arya assured that the situation will still show who you need to catch up with. Rhine decided to try again. That evening, the girls began to cook dinner. Lin was training all day long, but her efforts did not produce a result that was significantly upset. Arya also failed and wondered whether he had at least some magical abilities. But the Rhine denied that it was not. He was convinced that Arya had great talent, not only in one element. The Rhine surprised her perseverance in the study of the magic of void. The guy believed that she once captured other magic. These words cheered the Arya a little. The Rhine noticed that Arya had a fiery magic, so he decided to teach her the art of inflammation of the flames. Arya thought how useful this magic would be. It was here that Curie and Miller ran to her, and began to prove that the possession of the fire would greatly facilitate their affairs, because constantly igniting fire manually. A painstaking class. In the end, the Rhine praised everyone, including Lin and Sui. Lin, for her part, was joyful that their success is not far off. On the other hand, she believed that this was only possible thanks to Rhine lessons, and without his help, everything would not have been possible. Kiri supported Sui, sharing the same opinion. She even mastered the method of determinants. The girl noted that the Rhine was a wonderful teacher. Kiri confessed that she couldn't understand it before. But the Rhine explained everything so clear that the girl finally comprehended the essence. However, the Rhine himself believed that he did not do anything special. On the other hand, the idea believed that Ki was right. Earlier, Arya was also engaged in her teacher, but did not succeed. She thought she had an element of emptiness, but she didn't even know what was wrong. In turn, Every reminded Arya that at first she did not even want to listen to Rina. Arya asked and assured that she was now fully convinced of everything and the council would be advised to study in Rina. Rin, in turn, was glad to share knowledge with a girl. Lin, on the other hand, stated that she would not yield to others, and decided to demonstrate her ability to manage the land just on the kitchen table. Although the Rhine tried to stop it, time was already lost. Thanks to her gift, the girl turned the whole kitchen into the kingdom of Earth. Rhine explained that it happened because of the overuse of mana in a swing, and that was not right. Lin laughed and apologized to everyone. However, time was lost. Kiri has already caught up. Kiri again grabbed Lin for her face and asked what to do with her. Linus only shouted that strongly against any violence. The Raw was not introduced in what to do next, because the room was covered with dirt. Lin only continued with a sense of guilt to apologize to everyone. Instead, Arya was concerned only with her clothes. Lin even promised that when it became stronger, this would not happen again. And Melia, laughing, realized that earlier they had never had so much fun while eating. At that moment, Sui approached her, and Melia began to wipe her face with a handkerchief. Not long thinking, Melia suggested that girls go to buy. Melia suggested to buy, but the Rhine doubted whether it was serious, because the lake was far away. She asked if they had a bathroom, which she received the answer, which of course, no baths. Melia noted that baths are the privilege of aristocrats. The constant heating of water requires magical tools that cost crazy money. The Rhine thought about this issue. Without hesitation for a long time, he suggested making this bath on his own. Noticing this, the girls came to their eyes. Learn from the Rhine when they can finally take a bath. The Rhine replied to create it with magic, so everything will be ready very quickly. The guy noted that to implement the plan, he needed a large space, to which Melia replied that there is a warehouse near home that can be safely used. The girls were so happy with the new bathroom that they have already started discussing lingerie baskets, towels, and soap. Without a second, they rushed from home to quickly bring everything they need. The Rhine didn't even know how to perceive it. After all, they calmly grabbed and decided for him. Bringing showed a room where the girls were going to take a bath and he just fell. Just in case, he asked if they wanted a bath of this size. Melia replied that the larger the better. He was still horribly surprised, because this room was the largest composition in the village. However, Melia denied that they were still not going to use it. Mia always dreamed of a bathroom near the house. She was delighted that her dream would finally come true. The bath will be. To be able to swim, she asked the Rhine to make a deep bath. Instead, Arya insisted on the sole and a stylish tile floor. Invite the Rhine to create a statue of a lion from which hot water will flow. Instead, Silly dreamed of a slide. In the end, the girls had hopes on the Rhine and hoped that everything would work out well. Despite the promise of girls to fulfill all their requests, he still did not imagine how to do it. He looked at the glowing faces of the girls and realized that there was nowhere to retreat. He just couldn't upset them. First of all, the Rhine decided to take up the issue of the land. The young man realized that a large area of land would be required for such a composition. Therefore, thanks to the creation of the earth, the Rhine managed to produce it in large quantities. Noticing how skilled the Rhine managed the land, Lin could not help but admire. The Rhine reassured her, assuring that she would soon gain such control, and with his new forces came to work. Using the power of the earth, the Rhine decided to change the shape of the bath. After that, the guy had another question. Where to install a bath? He pointed to one place and asked the girls whether it was suitable. They agreed that the place is really appropriate. In the end, the Rhine again used the land management to complete the formation of the bath. After a few moments, the earth finally took shape, causing surprise and anxiety in Sui and Lin. Finally, the form of the bath was completed. So Kiri and Arya asked the guy whether he completed what he had just created. The Rhine replied that he had not done yet. He was going to use a spell called quenching to complete the work. And finally, using hardening, the Rhine completed the construction of the bath. Added the tile as the girls asked. When Flynn realized that even such a thing could be created thanks to magic, she was genuinely admired. The bath looked surprisingly good, but the girl had doubts whether she really hardened, so she decided to knock on her fist. To check more precisely, the girls climbed inside and were convinced that the bath was really very firm. The material was reminiscent of ceramics, and Ara could not believe that Mana could create something like that. However, the Rhine argued that he created all this with the help of Initial. He decided to fill the bath with water, and at the same time show the girls the spell they had already studied, called Creating Water. Initially, with the help of magic, it created plenty of water above the bath and immediately sent it there. Looking at this fascinating sight, the girls heard from him what can be done with magic. And to complete all this, some other measures had to be taken. The Rhine plunged his hand into the water and applied heat. The girls immediately began to check the water and were surprised by its hotness. Their reflections focused on whether magic has any restrictions at all. The Rhine, meanwhile, reported that he would continue to build from the outside, and they can enjoy bathing. This is how the girls did after Raiden left. They quickly dropped their clothes and plunged into the bathroom. It was hard to believe that they now had their own hot boil. Finally, Lin noticed the lion that she ordered, but he dropped more on the flour. But for Sui, this idea still seemed reliable. At this time, the rain stood outside, so Ryan could hear all the girls' chats. Satisfied with what the girls liked what he did, then the guy decided to make the rooms soundproof and thicker. At this point, the girls turned into an unexpected direction. They began to discuss each other's breasts. The Rhine, who heard it all, felt awkward. Instead, Key noted that large breasts create only one problem. They are constantly waving their shoulders. She jokingly said she would give her breasts to AEA if she could. Aya could not hide the surprise from this impression, because she believed that large breasts were only interfering. He did not like such words, so she began to interfere carefully, trying to help the girl, because her breasts were disturbed. Arya was embarrassed to stop doing so. Kiri was sure that the Rhine would appreciate the breast, but the Aura denied that there was no reason to show the Rhine's chest. At that time, the Rhine, which stood outside and heard it all, fell on his knees, grabbing his head. "Why are I always?" the Rhine thought indignantly. He tried to convince himself that he had not heard anything and was not interested in it. To get distracted, the Rhine began to invent classes, forcing himself not to think about what he heard. However, no matter how hard, it was in vain. The girls' conversations did not subscribe. They discussed how someone gained weight and how their breasts jumped. In the meantime, the Rhine tried hard to listen to these chats and focused on his work with the wall. Finally, the girls finished bathing and started dressing. Kiri said he was still sure that the Rhine was not such a guy. She insisted that he was a good guy and he could be trusted. But Arya was just hoping that Kiri was not mistaken. Arya, meanwhile, combing hair, added that she also considers Rain a good person. Then she reminded her friends that the Rhine was only their employee. Soon the girls were already on the street and enjoyed freshness, which replaced the heat of the bath. This time, the Rhine continuously muttered his nose, trying to convince himself that he hears nothing, securing the wall. It was here that Arya came, heard his whisper, and asked what he was talking about. However, the Rhine did not respond to the girls in any way, although they just wanted to inform him that he could now use washing water. Before the night, the forest came to life, filled with anxiety. The monster woke up and hurried to hunt, but something else went wrong. Suddenly, one of the monsters flew out of his shoulders and lost somewhere in the bushes. Suddenly, the other wolves were howling to the moon. On that day, Arya thanked the Rhine for a new bath and suggested working hard for the good of the village. This proposal was not very inspired by the Rhine, because it felt extremely exhausted. At that moment, Kira recalled something important, and asked Arya to question when she plans to register the Rhine in their village. Instead, the Rhine could not tread why this procedure was needed at all, and addressed the girls. However, Melia reminded everyone that only men have the right to register new residents. Before that, everyone was engaged in Arya, and as soon as they remembered that the village is located near the demonic forest, everyone went there immediately. Now this categorically refuses to do. The Rhine clear the reason. The forest is really extremely dangerous. The girls appealed to the Rhine to throw the ballots for them, explaining that now he can only help them. The flight suggested that he should visit the city hall on his own, and the rest will be on their conscience. He agreed, but decided to visit a little later. Wanted to find a girl employees. He acknowledged that he got here by accident. As soon as the demonic forest calmed down, he planned to leave this place. Lin was deeply upset with this statement, because now, no one would be able to teach magic. However, the Rhine reassured the girl, promising to teach her everything that he would need to protect the village. However, he could not stay here forever. Buzzing through this decision, she decided to ask the Rhine why he wanted to leave, and the Rhine himself did not even know how to explain all the girls. However, Arya stated that she was satisfied. The royal person noted that the Rhine had already done a lot for their village, so it would be unfair to keep his force. Kiri did not stop interrogating the Rhine that he did not like in their village. Amelia also decided to adhere to the decision of the community. So Kiri finally released the Rhine and decided to act as everyone else. Meanwhile, the Rhine was warned that the road to the town hall would take about a week, so the sooner he leaves, the better. For a while, the Rhine began preparation for departure. Arya decided to join the Rhine. Wearing warm clothes, she looked at him and asked if he would not really freeze in such light things. The girl warned that it would be cold on the road. The Rhine assured that it is heat due to the magical shell. Then the Rhine decided to open itself to that girl. He reached out in her direction and said the right words. The monetary later, Arya realized that she was not cold at all. Then the girl realized that the spell protects the Rhine from a piercing wind. During the trip, Arya noted that the semantic forest is warm, but one should not forget that it was the north side. She said that it was very cold near the city council. But now, thanks to the rain and her magic, she is not terribly cold. Rain instead was glad to help Arya. At that moment, she confessed that she was feeling like the magic of the all-powerful. It seemed that whatever the matter he did, he could be a savior in any situation. Lowering his head, the Rhine remembered how everything was different earlier. He told the Aya about how others were constantly caught because of his magical abilities and never thanked. So the Rhine confessed that he was here only because he was expelled from home. Now he has nowhere to go. Hearing this, the Ara was surprised. At that moment, the girl realized that the rain resembles her. In this country, the status depends on the level of magical abilities. And if they are not, you will not even look at you as a person. As a child, Arya was called to his office by his father. He heard that despite studying with the most famous royal magicians, she could not master magic. I decided that such as army did not need a Frada home. The father announced that Arya was no longer eligible to carry their family name and decided to expel her from the family. He was not interested in where the girl would go on. Hearing Harry's story, a shade of regret appeared in Rains. However, the Arya stated that this village became a home for Rains, and all the girls, his family. Now Rains has realized Aryan's position and even felt envy to her. She also noted that the Rhine could stay in their village forever. However, at this point, the guy interrupted her by asking to remain silent. Seeing the monsters ahead, he immediately warned those who were nearby. I didn't understand where these monsters came from. After all, they never leave the demonic forest for no matter what. It was at this moment that Ray noted that the monsters seemed something frightened. In a moment, the wolves howled, and this howl forced the Arya to cover their ears. Then, at the same time, they began to move somewhere. The Arya remained puzzled and decided to ask Ray what it was. However, he advised the girl to hurry back to the village. The guy claimed that trouble could happen. Arya did not understand what could happen to rehearse. Then he explained that when the forest was injured, it accumulates magical energy for recovery, and monsters can absorb it. This time, however, the boys attacked a huge flock of wolves, and all the rain is added. Apply a considerable amount of magical energy to overcome them. She was convinced that the remnants of man were absorbed by something that she now lives in the forest. Even if other demons are afraid, it will not be easy to overcome him. The Era realized that rain means the appearance of a very powerful demon near the village. The girl decided to go back, but it was only halfway. The rain, seeing her panic, asked not to worry. He hugged the girl firmly and advised her to hold as much as possible. Arya was clearly not ready for such developments, so for a moment she slowed down, trying to gather with thoughts. However, he asked her not to speak so that he would not accidentally bite the tongue. Despite this, Arya still asked if he was now using the body reinforcement. In a moment, the boys raced back at high speed. At this point, nothing suspected Kira decided to collect water, but realized that the source would have to go very far. So the girl decided to ask the Rhine to bring water when he returned. She thought of making the idea of making a well near the village. It was at that moment that a strange noise came from the forest. The one saw the girl to release a bucket of water and open her mouth wide. She was faced with a threatening creature, similar to a wolf she had never met before. Let's get back south. Lin went home, holding 2 killed rabbits. She intended to brag about her other catch. Everyone rejoiced in the great catch Lin, although the dissatisfied Kira asked if these rabbits were definitely not a monster. Lin was convinced that these rabbits were not monsters, but noted that they were turning into a stone after death. Amelia even wondered how great it would be if the monsters could be eaten. However, Kiri and Lin remained absolutely calm about this idea. In addition, Kiri asked Lena to be cautious in the forest. The hero noted that although the Rhine created a protective perimeter around the village, it is still dangerous in the demonic forest. Julia was worried about what was happening in the district, especially because of possible rain, because they went to the town hall. But Lin reassured her, assuring that she could protect everyone. It was believed that they were able to overcome any monster, because Ryan himself taught them. It was then that Kiri decided to go to... It has passed some time. Sui and Lin were in the house, just destroying rabbits that Lin had previously brought. At this point, the confused Kyrie suddenly came into the house, which impressed everyone with her appearance. She was tired and tried to restore her breathing. Other girls immediately ran to her, stuck in questions about what happened, but Kiri vigorously forced them to silence them. make sure that silence had reigned around, she explained to the girls that a huge black creature had emerged from the forest of the demon. Carrie assured that she had never met such a creature before. She believed that it would even be able to jump over the ditch that created the Rhine. She recalled the Rain's words when he claimed that demons would never be able to overcome this ditch. As always filled with optimism, Lin asked Kiri not to worry and think about everything after dinner. But suddenly, powerful roar sounds. Suddenly the roar came from the roof of the house. The girls were horrified, they were scared, and they were afraid to even move. In a moment, the howl sounded, and all the plates fell from the shelves. Immortal Lin came to the window, hoping to see a wolf she had never heard before. And at this point, the wolf appeared in all its majesty. Wandering right under the windows of the house, the wolf detained his gaze on the inquisitive Lin. From fear, the girls stood like petrified. The girls did not have time and swollen with the eye, as the wolf was already near the windows of the house. The windows were unable to withstand the head, and the glass flew in small debris. At first, they did not even realize what monster we're dealing with. Kiri, instead, immediately exclaimed that she was exactly what she was talking about. And, as it turned out, the monster was able to overcome the moat. The girls were confused, not knowing what to do next, because the Rhine is absent in the village. Kuri suggested that the Rhine call for help, but Melia denied it, considered it impossible because they were too far with Arya. Amelia suggested receiving her rooms and barricading the door to temporarily ensure safety. When the girls were already hid, the wolf continued to destroy everything around. The girl was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and thought when the wolf finally leaves the area. However, Sui did not believe that he would retreat. The girl claimed that this wolf smiled when she noticed them, so the wolf really showed the girls his oscul before the first attack. Then Lin wondered if they would be able to defeat this wolf together as her brother succeeded. Rain? However, Kiri asked Lin to reject anxious thoughts and concentrate on how they can last before his arrival. At that moment, Mill remembered something important. The girl assured that the Rhine prudently left them unique artifacts for such cases. The line was satisfied with these words and praised the Rhine for his predictability. She then asked where the artifacts were, to which Milliere answered that they were in the Rhine's room. Then the girl gladly suggested to take up the business and destroy that monster. For a long time, everyone went to the Rhine's room to start searching for artifacts that Melia told. Kiri insisted that the artifacts should be found as soon as possible, and invited Amelia, who stood on the doorstep, to enter the room without delay. However, Mill had other intentions. She quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. The girls inside immediately noticed it, and immediately asked her to open the door. However, Melia urged the girls to stay indoors and not leave until silence prevails. Kiri realized that Mill intended to become a bait for a wolf. Potato knock on the door, she called on Amelia not to resort to stupid. However, Amelia only asked Kuri to take care of others, and the girl, herself, rushed to the door, calling for her friends to stop. Instead, he insisted that Kira needed to be returned. This time, Melia stepped through the destroyed house, and a picture of horror appeared before her eyes. She has not heard that monsters eat their prey at all as animals. After their attack on the village, even bones left people. The girl did not know if it was true, but she was convinced that the rain would be able to find out all the riddles. Melia believed that there was only one way out of this situation. She hoped that the demon would only be satisfied with her. Although Melia had a faith in itself, if its assumptions are correct, others would be saved. Not a miracle. The girl's hand has already touched the door handle. Melia felt trembling, but realized that it was necessary to gather and calm down. In the end, the girl dissolved the door and decided to run away without looking back, because the house could be further destroyed. But suddenly, the same sinful wolf appeared again before her. The frightening muzzle and deafening howls were horrified. The girl could not believe that it was not possible to win at least a little time. Closing her eyes, she remembered her family, Sui's relatives, Lena, Arya, and Kuri. In the end, Melia decided that she was ready to sacrifice her life to preserve the smiles of her loved ones. Closing her eyes, Amelia did not expect anything. Suddenly the earth began lettuce monster. Then Melia opened her eyes and turned. The girls decided to attack the monster using the magic of land management. Julia did not notice that her girlfriends were thinking, because she asked them to hide. However, they ordered Melia not to raise the noise, assuring that they would not leave it to die. At this point, the monster again turned his gaze on Melia. The forces of Linet have already been exhausted, and the monster did not even pay attention to it. Then the monster opened her insatiable mouth, preparing to devour the mill. Suddenly, a huge block broke out of the ground, which lifted the monster on himself, not allowing him to eat Milia. She looked at the monster and did not understand anything. Lin and Kiri also froze in astonishment. At this point, the monster was glowing to the ground, and someone's cloak appeared behind Millie's back. The rain flooded this area. Sui was more passionate about meeting them than others. Initially, we came to Milia, which was on my lap. Meanwhile, Milia asked Arya why they were here. Arya replied that on the way back they heard a terrible howl, so they decided to return. Despite the fact that the Rhine did not say it, he was glad that Milia was not injured. But instead of manifestation of emotions, he briefly ordered the girls to stay still, and he decisively headed to the demon. At this point, the monster had already woke up and stood on his paws right in front of the Rhine. Usually, the spell that the Rhine applied against this monster destroyed the demons instantly. The Rhine realized that this demon is much more powerful than everyone faced earlier. The Rhine was convinced that this monster was not a place here, and it seemed to be blindly managed only by its instincts. Watching the monster's paws, the Rhine suggested that it would probably want to escape. The guy was aware that it was in vain. The Rhine understood that the beast could not be released. The monster has already felt that there was no way to rescue. There was only one possible way out for this creation. The Rhine decided to collect all his strength and destroy the monster with one blow of a magical spell. The monster has already grabbed the Rhine with her teeth by her shoulder. Having realized his helplessness to the boy, it is clear that he will not be able to harm him. The Time Bishop just waved his hand, and this made the monster instantly start flying, and it flew away, somewhere in the mountains, somewhere very far. Enchanted girls only watched the events, admiring incredible power. Finally, the monster got the mountains and crashed into it with such force that the Big Bang occurred. Already in the next moment, it became clear that the monster broke through the mountain through. With such force, it was cut down by the rain. After only the debris remained from the monster, and the girl's house turned into ruins. Kiria began to reproach Neely. The girl asked what she thought and why she decided to sacrifice herself for the sake of others. Melia only answered with a sense of guilt. Sorry. Lin asked Kiri to calm down because Melia has already apologized. However, Kiri responded with a shout, saying that she would decide herself. Jerry could not understand why Melia did so, because she could die. With eyes full of tears, the girl said that they would all be incredibly sad if everything ended in this way. At this point, the Rhine stood next to the magic stones that he left the monster, thinking deeply. Suddenly, Arya approached him and asked why he was standing here and whether something happened. This question was so jumped by suddenly that he even stuttered. The girl could not understand why Rhine's face overshadowed sadness, because he saved them all. However, the Rhine was silent, and again Arya turned to him. She also decided to turn to those who had just been in their warm hug. Everyone approached the boy immediately, thanking him for the help and hugged him, while the Rain, on the contrary, decided to apologize. He apologized for the danger of the girls. He realized that it was not necessary to leave the village without protection. The Rhine acknowledged that if you think about it, was he who was guilty of everything, but the girls could not understand why the Rhine apologizes, because it was he who saved them. Then Arya approached the boy and took him by her hand. Then the girl asked the Rhine to lift her head, and when he fulfilled her request, Arya assured him that it was not his fault. The Arya was convinced that it was she who brought the boy to the town hall, and therefore considered all her responsibility. At the same time, the girl claimed that thanks to the Rhine, no one was injured, because it was he who was able to overcome the monster. Finally, Ar sincerely thanked the Rhine for saving it. Lin and Sui were unanimous about the Arya, because the Rhine constantly managed to help. Arya also noted that she would like to apologize. The girl confessed that until now, she did not try to understand him to the end and treated him unfairly. Although Kiri with Melia and wanted to deny, Arya was still convinced of the truth of this. The girl confessed that she wanted to use the Rain for the benefit of their village. Every day she was worried that he could escape, because he had no reason to stay in this place. Nevertheless, the Rhine did not escape and generously helped the girls. Arya, with tears in her eyes, confessed that the Rhine remains the support of their village, despite its selfishness. She, wiping her tears, acknowledged that the Rhine is really a very good person. Finally, Arya decided and apologized to the Rhine. She also added that she had one request. She asked the boy to stay in their village and become part of their family. Instead, he decided to visit the town hall first. The guy said with sadness that he would also have to repair the house. Tomorrow, the Rhine was going to think of a new protection against demons, and today he offered a girl to relax. But Lin noted that the Rhine's face was red like a tomato, and decided to find out the reason. The Rhine, however, replied that his face was not red. The boy spent the night in an old house, At some point, one of them thought, why do all the girls sleep in the same room with him? Milia explained this by the attack. In addition, only the Rhine's room remained whole, and given the rain outside the window, no one sought to sleep outside. Lin and Sui slept next to the Rhine, and it was obvious that he did not want to wake them up. However, the Rhine is still not liked. He realized that it was impossible to continue, and it is necessary to start rebuilding the house as soon as possible. Demons attacked, and the boys had almost no food. Stocks were not enough to last long, but optimistic Key thought it was better than nothing at all. The zone sought to enjoy a delicious lunch after stress experienced. At the same time, Gary asked her not to be upset, because it was not the worst that could happen. The first blow was that only ruins left the house. This was very annoyed by Arius. Kiri thought that it was worth asking the Rhine to restore the house, because it was impossible to live in ruins. However, she hesitated, having imagined how much time it would take. She also seemed unfair to seek help again, as we still need to prepare a greeting party. Suddenly the earth under the girl's feet trembled. The girl thought it was an earthquake. It was then that Milia entered the room and asked Arya and Kiri what happened. Arya replied to this that it was better for them to run away from home, because it was dangerous to stay inside. The girls ran out of the house and were stunned. A grand picture, the whole mansion, unfolded in front of them. When considering a long time, the girls approached the door of this impressive home. Arya was convinced that it was Rhine's case. Milia has long ceased to be surprised since she met the Rhine, and Kiri just suffered a shock. Finally, Arya opened the door and came inside. I immediately asked if the Rhine was here. In response, only silence. However, what the girls saw was struck again. This house was amazed by its grandeur. Suddenly, behind the girls heard the sounds of the Rhine's voice. He apologized and noted that he understood their surprise. Turning, the Aya saw the Rhine accompanied by Sui and Lin. The Rhine began to explain that it was dangerous to stay in a dilapidated building damaged by a monster. In addition, no one knows when they are attacked again. Therefore, the Rhine decided to restore the house as soon as possible and apologized to the girls for not warning them in advance. The girls confessed that they simply did not expect that it would be possible to restore the house so quickly after the rain. They believed that having a party in the destroyed house would be quite strange. Arya just asked the Rhine to warn her next time if he planned this. Milia, watching the cute behavior of Arya, was pleasantly surprised. Arya, however, asked Amelia, who she imagines herself at all. In the meantime, he showed the girls the way to the kitchen and suggested to cook something delicious, as none of them had breakfast yet. When the girls entered the kitchen, their surprise increased even more. They could not believe their eyes. The kitchen looked just charming. It seemed to girls that they could have delicacies daily with such a kitchen. A little time has passed, and everyone has already eaten, leaving the plates empty. After that, he told the girls the whole story of what happened to him on the eve of his visit to the village. The girls were stunned, heard and believed that the king behaved unreasonable. But the Rhine assured that all this remained in the past, and asked not to focus on the bad. However, Kiri was angry that the Rhine was offended, and decided to destroy the country from which she came. The Rhine reassured her and asked not to act hastily. And Rulia noted that there are bad people in each country, and their country is no exception. Arya decided to admit that she was extremely rough, and decided to apologize again before the Rhine. Subsequently, the Rhine realized that the situation became quite tense. Then Arya broke silence. She asked the guy if he means that he went to another country to start a new life. The girl suggested that in this case the Rhine could stay in their village. However, he urged Arya not to worry, confessing that he really likes their village. Finally, everyone was just looking for an excuse to throw a shadow on the Rhine in his country. Only one person was truly good. However, the girls warmly accepted him to their family. He confessed that it was enough for him to just enjoy delicious food and laugh together. The Rhine did not have time to register how Key rushed to him with tears in her eyes. She pressed the boy to her chest, full of pity to everything he experienced. Key said that the Rhine may not restrain tears. But in fact, the Rhine was so painful that he lacked his breath. At that moment, the guy suddenly remembered that he wanted to ask the girls something more. Why only girls remained in the village? This question was caught by the girls by surprise, and decided to share the news with the Rhine. The girls said that during the attack of the demons, more than half of the men were killed, and the rest of the inhabitants, frightened by the repeated attack, decided to leave the village. It was then that the tragedy happened. Several men conspired to steal the provision from the village, and then the head was fled. Very explained that it was because she could not trust the Rhine immediately. The Rhine, in turn, understood it. After all, anyone would be careful with strangers. And it was at this moment that Lin appeared. She passively praised the rain for a beautiful house with many rooms and even the second floor. Kiri realized that the line was acting like Zadrak again and decided to boil her. However, Lin confessed that she was just bored when discussing serious topics. To avoid another dispute, the girl exclaimed her favorite, "I am against violence." At this point, the presenter suggested that the girls look at the house. He tried as he could, so he asked them to evaluate his work. The girls were slowly walking the corridor, looking at the room behind the room. They praised the Rhine for his efforts and could not knock the house. The young man said that he had expanded the building to create more rooms, so each of them could choose the one she liked. The girls were amazed at Rhine's skill and realized that magic was really amazing. Soon Rhine led Milia to the locker room, and then they entered the central room, bath. Seeing her, Milia was delighted. The Rhine explained that he had just reworked the bathroom because the old version had many drawbacks. When the Rhine returned to the living room, he was met by Lin and asked to climb her to the second floor. Rising to the second floor with all, the Rhine noted that there were 2 more rooms there. The first room is a library. For Sui and Lin, this was a surprise. Sui was delighted, while Lin clearly did not share their passion into books. The Rhine reported that there are many books on magic in the library, which are all located on the shelves. It was at this point that Sui decided that she would live right here in the library. At this point, Arya got one of the books from the shelf and realized that such literature did not meet in their country throughout history. If the court magicians learned about this library, they would have been envious. And Sui Rhine advised them not to be ashamed and take advantage of this treasure. The Rhine approached Lin and gently stroked her on her head. Lin asked him, "What happened?" Instead, the Rhine asked, "Lin, did you go?" Lin, on the contrary, admitted that instead of reading books, she would have been better trained, because she has not reached the desired level of skill. After that, Rhine led her to another room, with the confidence that she would like this room. Opening the door, the Rhine and the laziness entered the workout hall. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." This time, other girls, who were also fond of the training hall, have already joined them. But the Rhine noted that there was something interesting, and invited the girls to follow him. At first they needed to go down to the ground floor. The boys walked through one door and began to climb another stairs. When Ara wondered where they were leading, the young man kept my secret and told nothing. When they climbed, even Linitz and Sui had time to get tired. But the Rhine assured that there were very little left. Finally, the guys got the goal. The Rhine brought them to the observation deck, from which a wonderful panorama of the whole environment opened. The girls looked into large windows and fascinatedly admired the landscape. They first saw mountains from such a height. The next few minutes, the girls looked at the landscape and enjoyed his beauty, while the rain was left behind, satisfied with his creation. At some point, Lin paid attention to the fact that walls appeared around the village. The girl was amazed and could not understand when they had time to build them. How quickly did it happen? On the other hand, she claimed that she usually wakes up from any rust and did not understand how she could not notice the change. Melia suggested that they may have slept firmly all that had happened. However, Lin still complained that the windows on the staircase are too high, and she could not see anything. She promised the girl to think about this question again. Then Arya again turned to Drain, thanked him for the help of the village, and reported that he agreed to teach them magic. However, Drain did not completely understand what Arya meant, and decided to ask about it. Arya explained that even without any ability in magic, she was given a chance to become stronger thanks to Drain. And now, they all have the opportunity to protect their settlement on their own. But Ar did not have time to complete her speech, as the Rhina suddenly grabbed her by her shoulders. He realized that Arya meant the opportunity to ask for anything. It was a surprise for the Arya, and she could not immediately answer the young man. Then the Rhine stated that in this case he wanted to continue their training. He was convinced that the girls would be full. It was then that Arya realized what they signed up for. After a while, the Rhine suggested training for girls in a demonic forest, which caused a great indignation. The world did not understand why you could not just train at home. She considered the forest too dangerous, so the Rhine asked the girls to share their thoughts about the demonic forest. In turn, the girls expressed their thoughts. Kiri considered a demonic forest to death. Sui called him a real hell, and Mill, thinking, came to the conclusion that it was a den. the line warned that it was equivalent to suicide. Instead, the Rhine noted that the girls were. I explained that the forest had its advantages, and asked the girls if they knew what exactly. At that time, he noted that in the demon forest, everything grows much faster. But Lim wanted to show her awareness, and said it was because of a warm microclimate inside the forest. It was at this point that Arya intervened. She noted that they already knew about it, but the girl did not understand how all this was related. However, the Rhine patiently explained the impatient Arya's, which was the whole point. Guy explained that the demonic forest is saturated with powerful magical energy, which significantly accelerates the process of studying magic. The Rhine decided to take advantage of this feature, while at the same time it has caused some alertness and anxiety in the area. However, after rapid calculations, it became clear that 1 year of training in the demonic forest is equal to 10 years of preparation beyond. The girls could not believe what he just said. But the Rhine explained that he learned about this feature when he was trained as an aristocrat that was fighting the demons. The area realized that the Rhine wanted to indicate girls. Training in the demonic forest would lead to a significant increase in strength and speed. During the progress of the girls, the Rhine brought several cards. At first, Ella thought it was a magical determinant that the Rhine once gave her. However, the Rhine explained that this map works differently. You need to try to invest in it, your mother. As a result, new inscriptions began to appear on the ID. She explained that the identifier previously pointed to the girls on their element. Now he was called Shade, and demonstrated the features of the bodies of young heroines. Having examined the possibilities of Arius, the Rhine noted that its endurance at altitudes, but with force, there were problems. The girls suggested that it was probably because of persistent workouts. Then Payne advised that other girls also try to instill their manu into a decisive factor. The girls responded to advice. Each had their own peculiarities that made them unique and valuable. Now, everything was clear for the Rhine, and the area was wondering what would be next. The Rhine replied that they were waiting for training ahead. Soon the boys reached the forest where the demonic aura prevailed. The girls could not believe that they really reached this point. They were all frightened. Then the Rhine decided to give them some examples and asked them to watch carefully. The guy now demonstrated a spell strengthening of the body, which increased the physical abilities. However, the Rhine noted that the longer the girls support this spell, the more they will need. He also argued that thanks to the strengthening of the body, they could even overcome an unrelated demon. After that, the Rhine began to tell the girls somewhat important. Medicinal herbs that grow only in the forests inhabited by demons, it takes in hand. The Rhine argued that these plants should be harvested together. Terry became interested in the collection process, and asked why not disrupt the plants manually. To which the Rhine explained that the use of a special spell allows to maintain the freshness of plants forever. It decides, if you just break this plant, most of its healing properties will be lost. In addition, he added that the plant should be stored in a reliable place. Leaving the plant in a regular bottle, it can be easily damaged. But it is necessary to put a strengthening spell on a bottle, and then it will be much more difficult to break it. Train assured interested girls that it is only necessary to find it and bring home, and their training would end. It seemed like a simple task, but suddenly the Rain found a strange facial expression around the area. The girl confessed that at first she thought that the Rhine had the task of killing a mighty demon. It was a surprise for the Rhine. He asked in surprise if she considers him a monster. The Rhine realized that staying here became dangerous for girls. Arya asked if she had to fight. The Rhine replied that now the main thing for them is to increase the magic energy. For example, the Rhine cited the wolves. They usually have about 10 units of mana. He explained that at the moment there were only 3 units in this area, and at least 7 units were required to cope with wolves. Then Miley asked why just not train, for example, not to strengthen the muscles. But the Rhine explained that it would not help. After that, the guy suggested that the girls start looking for a cherished plant, and if they meet a demon, run immediately. He insisted that girls could not handle the demons yet, noting that they were tired more than usual. The girls realized that they did almost nothing, but already feel strong fatigue. The Rhine warned the girls that the deeper they delve into the forest, the more the magical power of the forest presses on them. If someone dares to reach its center, it can even die from excessive pressure. That is why the girls were now completely exhausted. The guy tried to explain to them that first they needed to get used to the huge pressure of the forest. Here, the exhausted Lin realized that learning will not be easy. At this time, the Rhine noted that given all the above, It would be better that the girls do not delve into the forest. However, Lin, who so sought to go deep into the forest, was a great danger to him. At that moment, the Rhine thought and realized that the demonic forest could be considered a kind of dungeon. Lin, who was not very versed in such issues, asked the Rhine what he was in mind. The Rhine told the girls that he had once visited the demonic forest. After passing through the jungle, he came across a volcano and a little further on the desert. One way or another, the demonic forest is truly a strange and mysterious place. Hearing such a story, Lin and Sui felt the influx of strength. They were drawn to the demonic forest again, because the Rhine's story seemed incredibly interesting to them. However, the Rhine had a different opinion. The Rhine tried to convey to the girls that to wander the forest and suddenly fall into the abyss. It is not as exciting as it seems at first glance. The constant chase of demons, lack of food and sleep for several days, searching for a place to relax. All this does not look attractive. Hearing this, Lin took her words back. After listening to all the explanations, the Rhine decided to leave the girls and went in search of medicinal herbs. Subsequently, many jars with medicinal herbs appeared on the table in the house of the ancestors of girls. One of the girls showed Cyrus how to use one of the plants to spell from extraction. The guy enthusiastically explained Kira that juice from healing plants could be obtained with the help of this spell. The girl, taking the bottle and carefully examining it, asked how to use this juice. Ruin gave an example that it can be used instead of fertilizer, which seemed fun. The girl even thought that Ren was joking. At that moment, Ruin realized that girls could move to the next stage of study, but noticed that they were not effective enough. Therefore, he thought about the possibility of combining them to achieve better results. In the end, the guy decided to act just as to divide the responsibilities between the girls. Initially, the girls could not understand what it was about, but the Rhine explained that the guy seeking to assign each role in the group. This would help them to clearly understand their responsibilities and actions. The guy firmly believed that with the onset of strength, girls would begin significant changes, and certain features would develop better than others. The Rhine also noted that during training in a demonic forest, girls should take into account the individual strengths of each. For example, one of them could become a tank and the other by a scout or a traveler. After explaining this to the girls, he asked if they understood what was being said. R jokingly denied, saying that she was already the head of the village. Lin, instead, perceived the Rhine's words as a hint to climb a tree for inspection of the territory. But such a matter was really like. He then distributed roles among girls. He argued that Sui could support others with his magic, and Kiri could help with potions and collect materials. Finally, Mia's turn. The Rhine firmly stated that Melia is perfectly suited to the role of a healer. Others rejoiced that it was the Melia who had instructed this role of the Rhine. The role of the healer is extremely important. Thanks to Melia's ability, no one will have to worry about wounds. Although Melia has agreed to take on this important role, the sadness on her face was reflected. The Rhine returned home extremely tired and exhausted. At home, Carrie was waiting for him, who immediately noticed him fatigue and offered tea. Genossier took off his sip and felt a pleasant aroma of the drink. He wondered that it was for tea, and Carrie replied that she had prepared him from the medicinal herbs, which she got in the demonic forest. Pearl added that she read in the book about the properties of these herbs that help to relieve fatigue. It was this information that she took as the basis for tea preparation. The Rhine, satisfied and in a sublime mood, suggested that she collect more of these herbs next time. The boys went to workout, which this time took place in the open air. Kiri decided to ask the Rhine as a team, to which he gladly replied that his students have significantly improved their skills. Sui, meanwhile, mastered the magic of water. The girl confidently learned her skills, receiving full control over them. But it did not last long. In the end, all the moisture from the air struck sea. She also was in vain, did not waste time. Practicing the magic of land control, something went wrong, and it was littered with a mountain of soil, which did not cease to increase. He advised Lin to stop a mana flow and go to take a bath. Instead, Kiri noticed a certain pattern in Lin's actions. The stronger she became, the more mysterious and strange her mistakes were found. At this point, Arya trained her skills and asked Rina to evaluate the result. The satisfied girl shared that after training, she was able to break the stone and mastered the art of strengthening the body. But she also decided to do training. After all, she managed to create one potion. She transferred the potion to Rain to evaluate her work, and began to be nervous about the result. Rain carefully focused on comparing her potions with her own. As a result, Kiri's potion was significantly different from Rainoff, and the volume was smaller. She was completely upset by the results, believing that her potion was unsuccessful. However, the Rhine assured that it was amazed at the speed at which Kira had achieved such results, because it took much more time at the beginning. Because of this, the Rhine praised Kiri for his excellent work, which was a little bit of a girl, but also caused her a smile. At this point, Mill left the next room. He noticed her and exclaimed it. Mill, in response, made herself quite unusual. At that time, Kiri realized that Mill was planning the same thing today. The girl explained to the surprise that Mill has been going somewhere in recent years. This news alerted the guy. Kiri asked the girl what happened. She replied that Millie seems to be worried about something. Kiri noted that Millie never showed how to practice magic. Even the Rhine began to worry a little. Meanwhile, Milia had already left the house and headed somewhere in the woods. Ein decided to find out what was happening to Milia. When Ein came out, he was covered by the thought, maybe Milia trains? But if so, why does she avoid him? In the end, the guy saw a girl standing his back to him by the tree. Looking closer, the Rhine realized that Milia was busy. The girl held a needle in her hands. Suddenly, Milia stabbed his finger with a needle, and a stream of blood protruded to the surface. But the girl quickly used the magic of healing to heal her finger. However, after a long expectation, Miller realized that she had failed. This is not the first case of her failure, so the girl felt a real annoyance. It was at this moment that the Rhine called it. Milia was surprised by his unexpected appearance. Initially, the Rhine apologized for the fact that he followed her without permission. The guy only wanted to report that Milia could contact him in case of any problems. Then Milia confessed to him that he had difficulty using the magic of healing. She explained that it was only her problem, and even the priest could not find the cause. Milia asked the boy if she told him about her inability to use magic. This also applies to the magic of healing. The girl explained that in order to master this skill you need to study in the church, and it requires considerable money. Despite all the guidelines, Malai could not master his skills, and in the end the priest was desperate in his efforts to help her. In addition, Amelia was a nobleman, but her family turned away from her. This is exactly how she was in this village, where she started a new life. Finally, having listened to the whole story, the Rhine realized what was the matter, and Sadmilia, in her turn, added, watching others trying, she also decided to try again. The girl claimed that she read all the books about magic in the library, but nothing worked. She explained that magic is activated, but nothing is happening. The Rhine thought about Melia's words that magic could be activated, but the wound does not heal. Julia stood with a smile through tears, confessing that in the demonic forest she would not be able to help the Rhine. The girl felt that she would only interfere with everyone. However, the Rhine did not agree with this. He assured that he would teach everyone's magic without exception. The whole city of Milio had to master magical art. The Rhine decided not to ask Malaya about the past, but asked Milio to understand that he was not at all like that priest. And yet, the Rhine with a smile on his face noted that he has the idea how to help this person. Hearing this, Milia blossomed with joy. The Rhine decided not to delay and immediately started acting. For something, he first rolled his shirt sleeves. Then the guy cut his hand with magic, and the blood fell out. Milia was scared and could not understand why he did it. So why did the Rhine decide to cut my own hand? She jumped on her feet and began to think how to act, because the cut was very deep. The girl decided that she should return home immediately. However, the Rhine denied that there was no point in returning home if Mill was able to heal the wound on his own. However, Milia could not understand how possible. The Rhine suggested that the girl treated this wound with the help of healing magic. Milia claimed that it was impossible, and again assured that she was not able to heal. The Rhine denied that she was wrong. Milia did not understand what he was talking about. Then the Rhine asked if she knew how the wounds usually heal. Milia, with tears in her eyes, confessed that she did not know, because she is not a healer. She only repeated that she needed to return home as soon as possible. And the Rhine noted that this is the problem. However, Milia was not clear what he was talking about. The Rhine explained that during the restorative spell, it is necessary to clearly imagine how the cells are recovering and the wound is healing. The Rhine also reminded the girl that it was necessary to clearly imagine how the wound heals. Milio listened carefully to the Rhine and decided to try to apply the healing spell again. The girl reached out to the Rhine wound and tried to heal her. Amelia advised to carefully imagine how the blood covers the wound, forming a clear image in the head. Julia listened to the words of her boyfriend, and without hesitation she followed his instructions. However, he noted that the girl should focus on stopping bleeding and cell restoration. If it copes with it, the wound will disappear instantly. No matter how hard she tried, she could not imagine how the wound heals. The girl was panic, because the blood from the wound of the boy was steadily flowing. Then, watching the panic mill, the Rhine gathered with thoughts to reassure her. After trying again, Amelia closed her eyes and realized that the Rhine believed in her. Therefore, she realized that she should not panic. When Amelia tried again, the blood began to thicken, and the wound, healing. Finally, she managed to do it. Suddenly, bright light began to radiate from the hand of Rin. There was no scratch left on the man's hand. Rain was glad that Amelia managed to do it. He showed her that there was nothing complicated about it. He barely had time to agree as Nelia jumped to him with his arms. The girl confessed that she was very worried. In her eyes, fear was reflected. She begged the Rhine not to repeat this, although she asked her to teach her magic. Having realized his miss, he found it necessary to apologize to Amelia. Subsequently, when the sun was approaching the horizon, the boys decided to have a snack. Despite the image, Millie covered it on the table, serving. He thanked her and noted that everything looks appetizing. Lin noticed that something was wrong with the Rhine and wondered what had happened, but he assured that everything is fine. Kiri also seemed that something was wrong with the Rhine. The girl even seemed that the guy had done something again. And the Rhine, in turn, thought that Melia was still angry with him, and he should apologize to her again, but a little later. Turning to all, Reem announced that from tomorrow they would start training in the Woods of Demons. Some of the girls joyfully perceived this news, while others doubted their readiness, feeling that their strength was still insufficient, and time has not yet come. It was unexpectedly coming to this moment. But the Rhine assured that the girls have already passed many training and mastered basic skills, according to their roles. The man was convinced that they were already ready for testing in the Dione forest. Lin and Suai decided from these words that Melia had already mastered the magic of healing, which was extremely comforted. Julia herself confessed that she had difficulty before, but today everything succeeded. Melia noted that she had succeeded only through Rain. Rain and other girls were glad to hear these words, so they decided that tomorrow they would all make every effort during training. The next day, Lin, sitting on a tree in the Woods of Demons, carefully sought something. Then the girls went down and reported the Rhine that the situation was normal. The Rhine decided that it was time to split and leave here. However, Era had a question. Sorry and burdened with a bunch of things, she asked if the Rhine decided to study it. Arya could not believe that magic was being studied in this way. The Rhine insisted that there was no better way to improve physical strength than exercises. But he noticed that the worm for Arya was too heavy and decided. Hearing this, Arya decided to continue to carry this heavy burden on her shoulders. She assured that she could withstand all this, because the only one could protect others. At that moment, looking at Arius, the Rhine remembered how he once went through it. So he wished her success. He then asked the girls to split into teams and start training. He decided to stay nearby to be alert in case of danger. After a while, Kiri was so fond of harvesting the right herbs that she even broke her clothes. Hearing this, Melia promised that she would correct everything as soon as they returned home. Lin, however, suggested that Kiri would ask for their so-called grandmother new clothes. Arya, having heard such a proposal, was very indignant. She insisted that the woman would not be called grandmother. Instead, the Rhine was unclear which grandmother was talking about, and he decided to find out the girls. Melia explained that under the word grandmother, Lin meant the countess who manages these lands. On the other hand, she added that Countess is Alicia Floria and she is her aunt. Arya noted that her aunt is a great woman who visited many battles, and her name is known in all corners of the world. Kuri believed that Alicia could be safely called a living legend. Alicia, the goddess of fire, the fighter of the dragons, the supreme judge, the purple, so it is called people. Melia claimed that Alicia was incredibly strong. Moreover, she managed the duchy on her own. From such exciting stories of girls, it was obvious that Alicia was an exceptional person. She helped in difficult times more than once. In the meantime, Ki added that Alicia also gave them new clothes. The girls decided to ask Arya to give gratitude to Elisik during her next meeting with Elisik. Arya has not visited her for a long time. She understood this, but acknowledged that Alicia was afraid. On the other hand, the Rhine came to the conclusion that Alicia is very harsh, as many rumors go about it. At that moment, Lin and Suya noticed something and immediately reported the Rhine. The Rhine began to look carefully in the direction of the girls, and noticed some very unusual trees there. He stated that he would be ahead, and urged others to follow him. On the same day, a conversation took place in the majestic home. The woman learned from her subordinate that only 5 girls live in the village, and this caused her indignation. She ordered the carriage to be prepared immediately and to go to the village. It was suggested to change the decision, explaining that it was possible to send a messenger instead of a personal visit. In response to these words, the knife flew rapidly in his direction. This woman was the Duchess of Alicia Floria, who claimed that her beloved niece was in the village. In these circumstances, the young man promised to arrange everything. Alicia jokingly threatened that it would break it into pieces if it was repeated. After a while, the Duchess was already in the carriage, hoping that everything will be fine, because winter is approaching, and 5 girls will not be easy to survive. Let us return to the Great Lake, which was discovered by Sui and Lin. Considering the lake, it could be assumed that the river was flowing nearby. However, the Rhine reminded the girl that the demon of the demon was like a dungeon, and that was worth keeping in mind. She claimed that the lake could have come just. Dean was sitting right on the shore at this time and thinking about how strange it was. Suddenly, the girl noticed something unusual and called the Rhine. She pointed to a lake with huge fish with one hand and reported it enthusiastically. At this point, she approached Lin and easily touched her head, warning not to approach the lake too close, as it could be dangerous. Then the Rhina glanced at the huge fish that Lin spoke of. She noted that these are definitely not demons, but ordinary fish. However, Kiri could not believe it. Fish cannot grow to this size. One of the neighbors, Sui, expressed the opinion that such huge fish can be the result of magic. The Rain supported Sui, noting that she expressed an interesting hypothesis. The man added that in places saturated with magic, everything grows much faster. He stroked the girl on her head, praising her for ingenuity, because it is probably due to their magic, the fish grew so much. Unlike her, he was upset. She thought that if they had a fishing rod, she could catch such a fish. Amelia agreed with Lin. A long time has passed since the girls tasted fish. Besides, remember that Arya had a fishing rod in his backpack. She was a little surprised, learning that the boys also took a fishing rod with them. The girl could not understand why in the forest where demons lived, they needed a fishing rod. Instead, the Rhine insisted that the fishing rod would be useful if they were able to find food right in the forest. It was found, but the terrain seemed too small. The girl doubted whether it was a fishing rod. The Rhine, however, explained that it is a complex fishing rod. Gathering it, it will be possible to fish. The guy planned to use food as a bait and not forget about the float and sinker. The line was passionate about how many baits took the Rhine. Soon the boys were already fishing. But Arya could not stand. She was annoyed that they were sitting so long. However, the Rhine only asked to wait a little. And suddenly, the guy finally caught a huge, wonderful fish. When the fish was already on land, Lin wondered what to do next. Rhine advised to create a container with water. Using the magic of water creation, the Rhine surrounded the fish with a huge water ball. Subsequently, others joined them, deciding to start fishing. Subsequently, several fish were already swimming in the tank, so the Rain suggested to make the reservoir larger. Arya watched this with irritation because she could not catch anything. Then the Rhine reminded the girl that it was time to return home, because the sun was already going on the horizon. However, Arya, indignant, denied. She was not going to go until she caught at least one fish, because she was decisively set up for success. On the other hand, he reassured Arya so that she would not worry, because next time she may be lucky. However, the Arya remained relentless. She felt that she could not disgrace the honor of the head of the family. She even joined the girl and tried to help extract the fish. Arya began to doubt whether it was fish. Finally, the big fish came into the world. For a moment, she rose above the water, as if demonstrating her greatness. After such a triumph, for a few seconds, Arya and Lin were simply faded in an endless surprise. Then Lin realized what had happened and began to admire the Arya. But Arya was only asked to help, because the fishing rod seems like that was about to break. Sui came to the rescue. She used the magic of strengthening to make the fishing rod more stable, and wished good luck in the future, assuring that now the fishing tool would not break. At that moment, the Rhine, watching the events, realized that the strengthening of Sui was extremely powerful. She was training a lot to reach that level. Realizing this, the guy decided not to help the girls, because they could cope. At the same time, Arya persistently pulled the fishing rod, trying to pull a huge fish out of the lake. Finally, the fish rose to the surface again, almost completely showing itself from the water. The girls felt surprise and fear of this incredible picture. But suddenly they noticed that the fish had a claw. Such an unexpected turn of cases was even more stunned by everyone. The Rhine realized that it was just a giant crab. Full of determination, she sought to catch him and inevitably bring him home. However, Arya categorically stated that it would not allow you to bring such a giant crab home. After a while, the boys returned home friendly. Julia remained upset, because having made so much effort, she failed to catch anything. However, the Rhine decided to cheer her up, assuring that next time the luck would be smiling at her. Without spending time, the guy suggested that Arius go fishing again. However, the outraged Arya asked the Rhine to forget the idea of catching a large crab. However, the Rhine was not liked. He was convinced that Arius did not against the catch of such a beast. However, Arya insisted that it was completely uninteresting to her, more than it is even scary, and the Rhine's behavior seemed to her baby. The girls who went in front suddenly froze. Arya asked what had happened, but she already understood it when she looked forward. At the entrance to the village was a carriage decorated with a coat of arms. Recognized this carriage. She realized that she was her aunt's carriage, but she could not understand what she had forgotten here. The girls suggested that Alicia was so sad at this place that she decided to come. And at that moment, as from nowhere, Alicia appeared and greeted with Arya. Arya was so struck by a sudden appearance that she even shuddered. Not long thinking, Alicia rushed to Arya. Her aunt claimed that she immediately rushed to Arya when she found out that there were problems in the village. The outraged Arya only asked to stop hugging her. But Alicia was not going to release the niece, because it took too much time from their last meeting, and she sought to hug her properly. Despite the request of Arya, Alicia was not going to weaken her embrace. But suddenly, Alicia noticed that the Rhine was watching the situation with interest. Surprised by his reaction, she wondered what he was doing in part. The next day, a group of royal knights and court magicians wandered in the forest. The captain was outraged that His Majesty sent their elite group to such a thicket. According to him, one low-rank sorcerer would be enough for this mission. Some team members urged the captain to calm down as soon as possible to deal with these wolves. However, the captain replied that this is the problem. The captain explained that it was not important who they were tracking, because it would not benefit. He heard that some aristocrats who opposed the demons once did. However, he had only basic magic in the arsenal, known as the Wind Blade. The captain thought that if this guy could handle such weak magic, then the task here would be easy. He believed that they were stronger than this young man. The team, encouraged by the captain, began to praise knights and sorcerers. At this point, the team faced trouble. One alarming knight, having heard a strange sound, one of the frightened asked, "What was it?" The captain just laughed in response, deciding that the prey went into their hands, and suggested that the boys understand what the demon was. While the demon showed its true nature, when a giant bear appeared, the knights and magicians were amazed and could not understand where this giant monster came from. However, the captain ordered the detachment to remain in positions and not to retreat. It was believed that it was just a pathetic demon, so the knights were seriously set and decided to demonstrate their monster. Reflecting on the approach, the knights decided to use magic called wind blades. The blade, like lightning, rapidly rushed towards the bear. Knights, confident that the danger had passed, decided that this monster was not so scary. They did not even understand why only the boy they heard was called the anti-demos aristocrat. Suddenly the captain shouted loudly and sharply. As it turned out, the monster has not been overcome. This intrigued the captain, and he realized that the detachment would have to make a little more effort. Suddenly, he sharply commanded the detachment to stay in positions. The captain decided to personally come together in a duel with a demon. He used a magical technique called a large storm of blades. The team realized that the captain was seriously confident, and she was sure that such a powerful blow to their leader would not leave a monster with a bone. But suddenly the bear wore it again. The captain, without thinking for a second, landed right in front of the monster's nose. The whole team was shocked. How could the creature withstand the magic of the highest level? All the Knights of the Head rushed to rescue their captain, using wind blades and magical storms. But all their efforts were in vain. The bear remained unharmed. In the end, the sorcerers realized that their magic did not work at all. At the same time, they did not understand how the boy spoke of the captain was able to cope with the blades of the wind. At this point, the situation was even more complicated. Two bears crawled out of the forest, hearing a wild roar. In the finale, only a mournful cry of the detachment came from the forest. The action returns to the capital of the Holy Kingdom, where the plot unfolds in the king's castle. The king, in anger and dissatisfaction, hit his fist on the table. It turned out that his advisors sought to send reinforcements to the border, which caused the king to be real indignation. The king was convinced that reinforcements were not needed because the court sorcerers were already sent to the border. However, the head of the Order of the Royal Witch had a different opinion. He plunged into the explanation of all the details of His Majesty. The guy claimed that the month had passed since the royal sorcerers were sent to the border. However, the forces of demons did not weaken. He noted that their troops had already lost 40% of personnel, and if nothing is changed, the army is waiting for destruction. The king engulfed rage when he heard these news. He believed that he was simply mocked and joked, but they replied that unfortunately, it was pure truth. The head of the order argued that according to the legends of the king, the aristocrat who opposed the demons was able to overcome the whole army on his own, and he used only the basic spell called Wind Blades. Then the king asked the boys if they doubted it. But the boys assured that in no way doubt His Majesty. They added that their magicians also used this spell, but it did not produce any result. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with your request." The subordinates were outraged by the behavior of the head of the Order of the Royal Witch. They claimed that he would be part of the world, though he rests on the guise. However, the main argued that he would never dare challenge the decision of His Majesty. The essence of the question was that the loss of the army of borders could turn into a real disaster. The head only urged the king to make the right decision. When the king noted that the main forces are now focused on protecting the kingdom from the invasion of neighboring states, he felt concerned. If the chairman of the Order of Royal Wizards desires this, then he must find this young man and send him against the demons. At that moment, everyone in the hall exchanged views. In the end, the king reported that the young man had left the kingdom. This news did not joke the monarch, because he was convinced that he had come from the house of the count. However, unexpectedly the king remembered that after breaking the boys' engagement, they were lowered to the common man. Even the head of the order was amazed. He tried to convey to the king that this young man should be found immediately, but suddenly the king was brewed. Thundering with a glass against the table, he ordered the head of the Order of Royal Wizards to silence. Then the king threw the wine glass with him, saying that it was. The king stated that the army was not able to cope with even pathetic demons. He did not see the point in their existence if so. The king warned that the head of the order would be in great trouble if he again fails. After this conversation, the head of the order left royal rooms tired. He realized that with such a ruler, their kingdom was doomed. And the girl who was his assistant, the leader replied that it may be better to leave the kingdom if that happened. Then the girl wondered why he was so hard, and added that he could take the post of the main royal magician. The head only answered the head. Then the girl asked if the guy wanted to move to another country. The guy just laughed, answering that he was not ready to surrender. Shortly after her arrival, Ms. Alicia was already sitting in a mansion built in the rain with a dissatisfied face. In this intense atmosphere, I sat opposite Alicia, feeling her alarming energy. The tension reached the boundaries. And it was then that the personal Barlet's Alicia decided to intervene. Alicia took herself in her hands, changing the topic of conversation. She noted that she was very advice for the safety of the terrain and her friends. She also apologized for failing to come to the rescue. She said she had ordered one of the locals to inform her if there was a threat. However, too much time has passed without any news, so Ali should be worried. But thanks to Cessa's investigation, it was then that Alicia finally asked Ario what happened in the village. Ario told Alicia everything, and it caused her rage. She ordered Casses to find all the scoundrels who decided to escape from the village, and stated that she would personally deal with each of them so that they would ask for death. He turned to the Rhine, which was so frightened. He understood that it was only necessary to say the wrong word. He did not survive. The first question which Alicia asked the Rhine was, "What is your name?" The Rhine answered, calling itself, and added that it was a great honor for him to meet such an outstanding person. Alicia asked the Rhine to miss the formalities at the beginning of the conversation, because he was the only man in the village. She explained that she should be carefully checked because she could not allow any suspicion in the village. During this conversation, fear engulfed a young man. He realized that if Alicia did not like something, it is almost impossible to avoid the consequences. Then the guy began his story, revealing that in his country he was a monster hunter. And here, unexpectedly, Milia and Arya stuck the boy, saying that he began to live with them recently. Before taking it out the door, the girls were rapidly reigning. The corridor was discussing whether or not territorial reign, if he wanted to tell the truth. Waiting for the answer, the zone only asked him to remember that in this country, magic was interpreted limited. Melia added that the rain had arrived from abroad to teach them magic. If they find out, the guy can get into the mess. Melia realized that it would not be easy to hide the truth. Arya, on the other hand, also believed that it was wrong to deceive her aunt, but she was ready to go for it for the sake of Rhine's safety. The girls decided to create a perfect past for the Rhine. Melia promised that they with other girls would keep a secret, and began to dictate the young man with his new story. The Rhine did not even have time to remember all the details. Subsequently, Alicia listened carefully to the Rhine again. The man, trembling with tension and covered with sweat, claimed that he had previously engaged in adventures and lived. One day, traveling, he came across this village. Street, he said that he could not go past and remained helping. But this story seemed suspicious. The Rhine understood it on its own. He was aware that none of his acquaintances would believe that he was in this place by accident. Arena intervened to set up the situation. She joined Alicia, turning to her as aunt. Alicia believed her, but she added that she would finally believe if Arena called her aunt once again. Hearing the words of Regan's, Alicia realized that such magic really exists. Then Arena intervened again, expressing the joy that Regan's remained in the village. Regarding registration, they decided to postpone it until spring. So Alicia decided not to mention it in the report. At this stage, Cessa realized that the conversation was coming to an end, and asked Alicia to allow the start of supply. Alicia allowed it to do it, but noticed that it was in no way a gift. She insisted that Arya, as a village head, should be guided by the economy. Therefore, Alicia asked what she could thank for the supplies received. Here, Tamilia realized that they were saved. Arya confessed that they had nothing left. Millis added that after the recent attack of the monster they lost almost everything. The girls began to whisper, discussing how to thank Alicia for help. The Rhine proposed to show gratitude to the arms, and the magic stones collected from the demons would be an even better gift. Others gladly supported this idea. Melia and suggested adding vegetables to the gifts. To which Cessa replied that vegetables are quite valuable, because winter is already on the approach, and to the new crop is still far. Soon the table was filled with resources that the boys were ready to exchange for the reserves of Alicia. They even apologized to Alicia, explaining that it is all that she can offer her. Alicia did not see such quality stones for a long time, so she was surprised if the boys themselves were extracted. But suddenly Alicia noticed something even more valuable. It was a potion that prepared the Rhine. After some reflection, Alicia decided to buy all the supplies of the boys. Mulia was surprised and asked if she was sure of her decision. In response, Alicia assured that she was confident in her choice because it is really good supplies. The Rhine helped Cassie packing everything and bringing to the carriage. The girls still communicated with Alicia, not believing that such a modest number of supplies were worth her help. However, Alicia assured that if Arya expresses all her love for her aunt, it would be enough. And Arya, on the other side, with indignation, asked Alicia what she was with her. Then the girl turned to Melia to support, but only showed her heart. It was at this moment that Ar realized that Melia had betrayed her. It made her realize that she had no choice. So she asked her aunt to ask that she would be extremely grateful if she purchased all the goods. Such a proposal was very much like the Delicia. It was at this point that the joyful exclamations flooded the whole house. Mill began to encourage others, but one of the girls said she would never forgive it. It was at this point that Alicia approached the Rhine. She approached her to learn more. For her part, Alicia confessed that the boy's story aroused suspicion, but stressed that if he really helps the village, she would be grateful for his presence here. And she said she had one small request to the Rhine. "You didn't do anything here that you should blush, isn't it?" Without the shadow of embarrassment, Alicia Guy asked, forcing the Rhine to feel an unexpected fear. She intervened in the conversation, asking her aunt not to speak nonsense. The girl wanted to convey Alicia that the Rhine was a really wonderful man. It was then that Alicia realized that these two have already become close friends. She decided not to ask anyone about the life of the Rhine, neither about its present, nor about the past. And it was at this point that everyone realized Alicia already understood herself. She should say that she is happy to visit the village anyway. She asked the boys to leave other formalities on her. Alicia announced that she was trusting the well-being of this village of Rianaya, for which Arya sincerely thanked her. Suddenly, Alicia suddenly announced that the conversation on behalf of Countess Floria was completed. This statement immersed three interlocutors in deep shock. Alicia, on the contrary, stated with hatred in her eyes that she would now speak as a defender. She claimed that she did not believe in the Rhine's innocence against her niece. After all, every man, in her opinion, is a predator, like herself. At that moment, Alicia realized that before the construction of this house, the Rhine and Erie slept together. The girl confessed that she never shared a bed with Eritrea. Alicia acknowledged that her pregnancy awakened her jealousy, and decided that she would not concede the Rhine. He would have to win her again. In the end, Alicia loudly called the Rhine to a duel. So, after a while, Alicia and Rhine were already on the street ready for a duel. Alicia stated that although it is a duel, she is not going to kill the Rhine. However, she set the condition that in the event of victory, it will take away the territory. Other girls were standing nearby, watching the events, but did not understand what was happening. On the other hand, he replied Alicia that he could not make such decisions for the Arya, because there is no such relationship between them. These words were even more ignited by Alicia's anger. She felt that he considers her. Then Alicia asked the Rhine to explain why this place is so wonderful, giving him 500 words. However, Ray did not understand what Alicia wanted from him. She stated that Ray just seems to add that she would not have enough 3,000 words to speak. After that, Alicia called Arya to herself. Arya came and wondered what Alicia wanted. Having apologized, Alicia asked Arya to give her a sword. Arya could not understand why Alicia asked her with such a request. After all, she has a butler. Alicia admitted with laughter that she did not expect such a situation, so they did not prepare. In addition, Alicia did not want to use her sword in this situation. At that moment, the Rhine realized, although he noticed it for a long time, that the graph radiated an elusive romantic fascination. Finally, Alicia received a sword and, gracefully waving it, announced that the rules are simple. The defeated is considered to be the one who seems or cannot continue the fight. Therefore, Alicia added, which is also allowed to use body-strengthening techniques. The Rhine understood everything and prepared for a duel. At this point, the guy was called from the arena and the environment. Then the Rhine approached the girls, and they asked for the tricks of Alicia, who pulled him into this situation. Arya noted that when it comes to Alicia, it always goes beyond. However, the Rhine reassured Arya, saying that he sought to find out how powerful the Countess was. In addition, the Rhine was convinced of victory and had no doubt. While Alicia was fond of flights, the girls who watched all on the side tried to hand him every detail. They knew that Regan undoubtedly was strong, but believed that the girl, using all her power, could seize the whole village in a moment. Arya warned him to be extremely careful, because no one sought to destroy the whole village. It was then that the Rhine realized that they had a serious problem. He confessed that he could not hold back. One day, during training, the Rhine almost sent his parents to the world. It was then that he realized that the situation became critical. She called the goat and reported that she had important news for him. At this point, Alicia was full of passionate expectations. She stated that the Rhine would not be able to escape, because Arya belongs to her. Then Cassie called to the girl. Alicia looked around nervously and asked what he wanted, and did he see that she was not in the mood at all. Instead, Cessa simply asked to entrust him with this duel. It was interested in Alicia. "Thank you," she replied. Cessa replied that she knew perfectly. Rihanna would not overcome her, so she asked to replace Alicia for Rain's safety. Cessa stressed that outside observation would be sufficient if Alicia wants to evaluate the ability of Rain. In the end, Cessa managed to persuade Alicia, for which he undoubtedly thanked. He also admitted that he was a little worried, because the Rhine has long lived with this company. If Alicia started mocking the Rhine, what would Arya think about it? Alicia even imagined this situation in which Arya says she hates her. After all the manipulations, Cassie again asked Alicia if she really wanted to fight Rain, to which she desperately replied that she was absolutely unable to withstand such a test. Arya realized that Cass was able to persuade Alicia not to fight Ray, for which she expressed his sincere gratitude. Soon the sword was already in the hands of Cessa. Arya did everything possible to support the Rhine, assuring that it is not so difficult to try. However, the Rhine, holding a knife, confessed that he was not used to weapons at all, so the task seems not easy. In the end, Alicia announced a duel, and did not have time to miss a second, as Cessa just disappeared, which surprised the Rhine a little. But in the next moment, Cessa was behind the Rhine behind his back. Cessa almost hit the Rhine, but he cleverly evaded. It was then that the Rhine realized how fast the Cass was. He was also amazed. I wanted to end with one blow, and did not even know that the Rhine was able to dodge. But he just didn't go to seem so he swung his sword again on his opponent. However, the Rhine cleverly evaded. For a few more minutes, Cassie was constantly attacked by the Rhine, but he skillfully evaded. At some point, the Rhine came to the conclusion that Cessa, given its lightning speed, probably specializes in increasing the physical speed of movements. The Rhine realized that it would not be easy to keep the pace with Cass. Finally, the guy dared to attack. He first used magic called wind blades. Cessa was impressed when he saw that the Rhine was holding 8 squeezing. Although magic was not forbidden, he immediately realized that the Rhine is an extraordinary person with whom more effort would have to be made. Koss decided to check the Rhine's ability in action and attacked him again. He threw 9 at the rival's feet and exclaimed, "Explosion!" The explosion was so powerful that the Rhine could not see anything through the smoke at all. At this time, Lin and Sui, yawning and wiping their eyes, looked absolutely calm. At the same time, he realized that Cassis had tried to get the object of the throne, and decided that he was planning to attack from shelter into smoke. However, this only released Cessa, and the Rhine instantly attacked it with wind blades. Then he also decided to create columns. Using the control of the earth, the Rhine realized that, by obstacles, it is possible to use magic to thicken air, which leads to shortness of breath. If the Rhine was fighting with a demon, it would do so. But he did not want to use such magic against humans. Surprised that the Rhine created so many pillars in a moment, he realized that to stay away was the best solution. Cessa immediately realized that the Rhine had considerable experience simply by looking at his magic. He did not even realize that such a person lives in their country. Cessa realized that the Rhine exceeds him in everything. Despite the difference in force, Cessa believed that there was always a chance to win. Thinking about this, he decided to disappear once more from the Rhine field. The Rhine realized that if you act seriously, it could be threatened with Cessa. It would be worthwhile to be careful and not to break your weapon so inadvertently. However, the Rhine realized that there was no other way out. He has asked Arius in advance. At that moment, Cessa appeared from above. He was convinced that the Rhine completely forgot about the possibility of attack from above, so he was convinced of his victory. When Cessa was ready for a blow, the Rhine suddenly stopped his sword with his knife. At that moment, Cass was stunned and his sword shuddered, and so in an instant a crack appeared on it. The sword could not stand and broke, which caused Cass's horror and a complete misunderstanding of the situation. Ryan, realizing that the sword of Arius broke, felt anxiety. After some time, Alicia had already reproached Cessa for defeat. She drowned his face into the ground and asked what he could say in his defense. Cessa just apologized, explaining that he just underestimated the enemy. Alicia returned to the issue of power, acknowledging that she was confident in this brilliant talent, so she paid tribute to his victory. However, the girl added that this does not mean that she allowed the boy to take the situation. Instead, the Rhine smiled, not understanding what she was. He even had no idea about it. Alicia finally grabbed Cessa by her foot and began to pull him to the carriage, assuring that she would come back, and by that time the safety of the village depends on the Rhine. On the way home, Cessa told the Countess that the Rhine's strength could be compared to the most powerful storm. But Alicia was silent. Then Cessa asked if she was in a good mood, and whether nothing happened. Alicia replied that she just rejoices in the landscape, and besides, she is interested in one topic. She stretched a test tube to Cessa and asked him to look. Not understanding what it was, Cessa sought explanation to Alicia. Alicia explained that it was a tincture of medicinal herbs, obtained with a first-class spell. Thanks to her, the boys grown wonderful vegetables. But one such bottle cost so much that it could be purchased in the royal capital. Alicia was surprised that she could not believe her eyes when she saw an ampule among the stocks. She was even more amazed when she found out that the boys got it. Alicia was convinced that these stocks appeared in them due to rain. Instead, Cassis noted that he had long realized. The Rhine is an unusual man, and Alicia also knows it. The restoration of equipment requires special materials saturated with magical energy. After all, a country that will have more resources will win the war. Then Alicia grabbed her head and smiled, noting that she would be understood by herself. Only now did the girl realize that the Rhine was too strong for their places. So she was convinced that he had arrived from a neighboring country. Although Alicia did not know why he decided to arrive, but if he was here in their village, she should not worry about security. Alicia realized that Cassis did not like the rain, but she denied that losing such a powerful magician would be pointless. Cessa agreed with that. Cess decided to complete the registration of a new settler as soon as possible. However, Alicia advised not to rush, because this settlement was extremely difficult to find. Alicia was interested in the idea that the potions that could be made in its territory would become their most powerful trump card. In fact, it happened that the girl decided to study the brazen friend of the princess.